3, 2, 1. And we're in. How you doing, buddy?
Fantastic. So glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's been a long time. Do you remember what year I met you? What year I did your podcast?
2013.
Was it 2013?
I think so.
I was one of the first ones. I think you guys had only done a handful or something before I swung by.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah, because my brother was friends with Brian, and he was doing London Reel, and you guys were doing it out here, and then he introduced me to you guys, and then I came out and did it with you, and we had a great chat.
It was far-reaching. It was broad. You had so many irons in the fire then, and I assume that nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. There's lots going on, except now I'm here. Before I was just kind of passing through and traveling, but now I'm like kind of relocated, so it's exciting.
Like for the time being, or do you have like a master plan to bounce?
So it's been like a real rocky road. Like I mean, obviously I was based in China for like 18 years, so that was pretty solid. And then when I was traveling 300 days a year, I was based in Dubai, which was perfect. Because
Why was that perfect?
Honestly, like airfare connections, flight connections, no traffic, and ease of airport access. So I mean, I could fly into Dubai. I could get a taxi, get home in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Go back to the airport, show up an hour before my flight. They have their own check-in. It's so easy to get through immigration. Everything is like just super streamlined for like the global traveler. So. And it was great. And I was like living in a hotel. I didn't even have like a real apartment. It was perfect. They like kept my bags for me because I was only there for like 5 or 6 days a month, which I loved. And then when COVID hit, I ended up going back there because it was open and it was pretty kind of loose with COVID restrictions. So I just went back there. But then being there like months and months on end was a bit too much for me. So
why? Like, what are the cultural challenges for you coming into? You're Canadian.
Yep.
Traditionally,
yeah,
for those 18 years that you were in China, but like going into Dubai, is that a world, as I understand it, in many ways is set up to cater to the international crowd, but are there things that you need to abide by? Do you have to wear certain clothing in certain places, no alcohol, etc.?
Dubai is very open and very free, so you don't really have any specific clothes you have to wear or anything like that, but some basic respects around alcohol is kind of, so you're not allowed to drink in public, and public drunkenness is not really kind of allowed too much. But apart from that, it's a wide open kind of place. I consider Dubai to be like the Las Vegas of the Middle East.
Yeah, sure.
And the problem with that is, you're trying to, you're living there for 6 months a year in the winter because in the summer it's too hot, really. And when you're, going out with friends and stuff like that who also live there, like you're just surrounded by people living like their best weekend, like, and it's exhausting. Like, yeah. It really is. I mean, you're just surrounded by people who have just flown in, who want to party as hard as they can for 3 nights and then go back to London or Munich or whatever and sleep it off. And just to be around that like all the time was a lot to handle. So, and I wasn't able to live enough outside of, Dubai or in the suburbs or something like that. I didn't want to live on a golf community, which is very popular, but yeah, living in the city was just exhausting.
Did you ski in the summertime at the indoor mountain? Is that a thing?
You can do that. Yeah, absolutely. It's attached to the Dubai Mall.
Because you're Canadian, you're like, been on a mountain.
I've done it, but it's not, if you've been skiing for real, it's not very exciting. It's too humid. It's too, the snow is too wet and it sticks to everything.
Did you tell him?
Yes. Yeah, I tracked down the manager and let him know this was a shit experience. No, but it was okay. But obviously, like, relocating here has been interesting because I can still do the adventures that I want to do out of this location, and then also catch up with so many friends that I've met, in over a decade of being in the industry and chatting. And LA is just a wonderful mix of strange, beautiful, amazing people.
Yeah, everyone ends up in LA at some point, I think.
Yeah.
If they have a certain through line to their lives. Now, so you haven't stopped adventuring. So what's next?
Well, I have stopped adventuring on television because that definitely got side railed a little bit because of COVID. And I can get into that with you if you'd like. But then, so I have been doing like some private adventuring, but getting back to like bringing the whole crew out, getting the editors, the sound mixers, the map guys, the color correcting guy, like building that whole network again has been a little bit slower just because funding has been so difficult since COVID.
Have you gone extensively into packaging and selling the show to your audience? Do they know how you did all that shit? Because I don't, and I think that would be really enlightening for somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps and is modeling based on what you've done.
Like a how to make adventure television,
you don't have
kind
to
of
do
like
a course, but like roughly and in a short period of time, like what were the steps involved? You planned out this elaborate trip, you did all these things, but then when was it like, I could sell this thing and then fund the next one?
Yeah.
Like,
I think, so we did Tough Rides China, and I think when I met you, I had just finished India by the time we connected. Yeah, I remember that. And yeah, so I did this thing, Tough Rides China, and I didn't expect it to sell. And then it did. And then I was like, wow, that's exciting. But it didn't make anywhere near the money back that we had spent on it. Like,
sure, but were you like cold calling? Like, how did you sell that thing?
So, well, originally we had reached out to like all the broadcasters, like Discovery Channel, Nat Geo, Travel Channel back in the day, all of them. And we told them what we were going to do beforehand, but they didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Why?
Yeah.
Because you weren't celebrities, you didn't have the following. Like, what were their reasons?
All of the above. Like, we weren't celebrities. We didn't have any following. We weren't known quantities. It was our first TV show. They had nothing else no previous work to look at.
I see.
So that was a big challenge. So that was when my brother and I were just like, well, let's try, and we'll go out and have an amazing adventure. We ended up setting a Guinness World Record for our trip around China, which was great. And then we also got the 6-part episode, which was like, somehow we got that in the bank as well. And it turned out like it was a real learning experience, but it was also really wild because we haven't seen anyone shoot like that in China since, really, because everything's just too structured and broadcasters are just, no one's kind of running and gunning anymore in that kind of same way that we did it. And I was watching, the shows are like all on Tubi in the US, and Tubi's great. They show ads and stuff, but it's free to watch. And I was watching some of the episodes the other night, and I was just like, man, like I haven't seen anyone kind of go gonzo in Western China the way we did, like just motorcycling through Tibet, and even getting into Tibet nowadays is hard.
Got that. That's great.
Yeah.
And how big was your crew? It was just you and your brother and what? One other person, 2 other people?
With China, it was one cameraman and then one local producer who helped us with language and logistics. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tight crew. You can move fast.
Yeah.
Agile.
It's nice because, like some days you have to stop and make visits, which is how you generate the content to put together like a 26 episode thing. Like if you're going to have 26 minutes of a TV show, you got to have like 6 or 7 beats of like things that you can build around.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the rest of it is just crazy shit that happens on the road, and you can't plan the crazy shit that happens on the road. But it worked out well. Like I planned a lot of those beats, thinking like, oh, we need to do a few things every episode that the audience can kind of like hold on to, like a location, like something we can show on a map, something we can stop and learn about. But then the rest of the time, we're just going to go for it and see what happens.
Did you manufacture any?
We didn't manufacture anything. We wouldn't do that. I mean, that's the worst part of television.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I've known like adventure shows where, in the night they they on purpose like let the horses loose or the donkeys loose so that the next day like everyone has to carry 100 pounds on their back for no reason.
Drama, conflict,
garbage.
Now, learning the appropriate number of beats per 26 episodes, what was your guidebook for that?
You don't really know. So when we did Tough Rides, I never really knew where one episode would start and one episode would finish. Just knew you were going to go out for 60 days, and the goal was to try to do like a 6-episode like little mini series. So we just kind of tried to have enough beats in it, and then if there wasn't enough crazy stuff happening on the highways in between the beats, we'd have to extend out those visits. Like we visited a temple in Mongolia. We stayed with a local family in another place. So it just depends on like whether that's going to be like a 5-minute thing or like a 10-minute thing. And then so you shoot it the same way no matter what, but then you have to edit it based on like how much total content you have, and then whether you're putting the audience to sleep or whether you're bringing them enough kind of adrenaline and excitement of being on the road, right? Because the great thing about a motorcycle journey is it's all about movement and momentum. So if you get stuck somewhere, it's fucking boring. Like you need to be in a place and then back on the road, because that back on the road feeling is they set out to go around China, like they're really moving, like they're really doing it. And then of course every few days, like the landscape's totally different, right? And the audience needs to see that kind of like progression of things changing all around you.
I can't remember. Did you guys get shaken down by any locals or local police force or security forces ever? That's happened to me all over Latin America, and I won't name any names because I love all of Latin America. But like, did you deal with that?
It definitely happens. In China, we didn't have anything like that, and in India, we didn't have anything like that, and and in Brazil, we didn't have anything like that either. They're all pretty safe. Like if in those countries, if you get shaken down, it's like at the airport at customs, like when you're bringing in $30,000 worth of camera equipment.
Oh, right.
That's where they love to hit you. Yeah.
That's the guy has 2 parts in his hair. Is like, we're need at least $27.
Exactly.
US.
Exactly. The customs in India is particularly a challenge. But in Brazil, when we went to film in Brazil with Tough Rides, they almost didn't let us bring in a drone. And back in 2015, when we did Tough Rides Brazil, like no one had really seen drones before, so it was early. Like now they're everywhere, but it was a huge drone. It was like the size of this table almost, and that was like kind of like one of the early versions of the DJI drones.
Are there any places that you don't want to go back to?
So we've made shows all around the world, like Extreme Treks. We've filmed in like more than 25 countries. Any place I don't.
Nothing stands out as like, I don't need to go back there again.
Well, I mean, there's always more to see, like, and maybe it's not part of the trek or part of the trip, but I definitely have a good feeling about every country I think I've been to.
That's so good.
Yeah. Maybe like India was hard because we were on motorcycles and people were trying to kill us every day with their trucks and their buses and things like that. And
they were really trying to do that, like run you off the road and stuff.
They will absolutely run you off the road if you get in the way. Yeah, there's no holding your. I mean, like when you're on a motorcycle, you're always taught to like ride on the outside of the 2-tire like lanes.
Yeah.
So that you're protecting your lane, so that people don't push you. They'll come right in and push you right off the road.
Well, that's what you get.
That's what you get for riding on 2 wheels, baby. It's it's tough. It can be really tough.
So you wrap up Tough Rides. You've done a bunch of other treks, but then
Extreme Treks for BBC, which is the hiking and climbing and trekking all around the world. And then I did a similar kind of show for Discovery, which was called Expedition Asia.
So then are they high-fiving you when these things air and you get good traction and they say, okay, let's renew a contract to do it again. This time we want you to be in the Arctic? Or do you have to pitch that? Or do you have your agent do that? Like, how does that work for reality TV? Because I only know the narrative side, the Screen Actors Guild side, or
right,
fiction narratives.
Right. So like, yeah, I mean, with independent TV, like what I do, it turns out that I actually own all the shows at the end of it. So what I have to do, right. So what I have to do is I have to fundraise on my own, whether I'm taking existing capital or taking the royalties from other shows and pumping them into a new show. Maybe fundraise, maybe take a loan, go out, make 8 episodes. I have, pretty much total control over the locations, where we're shooting, my team, the whole thing. And then when I come back, I don't even deal with the broadcasters anymore. Actually, I just have an agent who just sells it. And because selling it with the BBC, okay, maybe they want it in this territory, but not that territory. Maybe they want it in these countries, but not that country. So then we have other broadcasters that'll take it in other places as well. And it just gets kind of sold all around the world eventually.
And what about the streamers? Is that something everyone's angling for in your sort of niche, or is that something you want to avoid based on the pennies per dollar you're getting per play? Like, how does that work with the rights?
Right. So if I own like a Tough Rides China and it's 6 episodes, I can go to Netflix and say, hey, do you guys want to buy this? They'll probably say no.
Why would they say that?
They have said no.
Oh, they have.
Yeah.
Well, that was then.
That was then. This is now. But no. But travel has just never been a genre that they're interested in. That was kind of the feedback, and it's still very similar. But then, if you go to Amazon Prime, they'll say the same thing. But then they'll tell you that you can put it on their streaming platform, as a pay-per-view, not as a, hey, we're going to give you $50,000 for your series, and we're going to maybe even put some PR behind it. and maybe a billboard or set up some interviews for you. When you go straight to streaming, and you're working on their pay-per-view kind of YouTube model, you don't get really anything, and the money is very, very minimal. So if the goal is to try to get someone to buy it kind of upfront and to want it enough, that's what my agent does. But they do it mainly with like linear broadcasters, traditional broadcasters, very much less the streaming partners, because the streamers really want to own most of their own stuff so that they can keep it on their platform forever. Whereas if they licensed my stuff, they would have to re-up it every year or every 2 years or 3 years, depending on the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cost for them, right? They rather just spend more money and own something in perpetuity.
You've been watching this for the last decade or so, seeing how it works from a network to a streaming service, what kind of money you can get for the content. Are you worried about the broadcast shrinking and everything moving to streaming and sort of absorbing the eyes?
I think it's funny. At first, when the streamers came out, and this was, I guess Netflix was the first big one. It was incredibly exciting because you're like, okay, it's another option,
sure,
to pitch to or to sell to. But actually, it turned out that they were kind of much more fickle and much more difficult to work with. Because I think when you're working with traditional broadcasters, you're dealing with, people who have been in film and television for a long time, and they have a certain way of doing things, which is great. But that way of doing things is very much focused around people. So you need people to make the content. You need people to sell the content. You need people to support, your content creators, your storytellers, and this kind of thing. But with streamers, everyone just kind of expects everything like now, like prime now. Like everyone just wants it as quickly as possible, and the attitude. It's more of like a techie kind of attitude than a kind of traditional storytelling kind of attitude. If
yeah,
that
it's
makes
less
sense.
Art and more consumption and commerce.
Yeah, and you see that with the kind of stuff you see on like Netflix and things like that. Like you see, sure, they've got the Maestro, and they've got they had House of Cards, which was my favorite show like of all time. So when they really do, get seasoned filmmakers, like David Lynch directed that, Kevin Spacey was there and produced it. Like when they had great acting and directing and stuff like that, you could see it did break through. But the majority of the stuff on the platform is maybe less exciting for me, at least.
Were you given a hero's welcome in Canada when you did your thing, when you broke your records? Well, like why not stay in Canada and be the king of travel in Canada?
It's funny, like no one in Canada knows about anything I've done.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's this.
How is that possible?
We just didn't broadcast in Canada. Like people just didn't have the chance to really see our show. It's very interesting, actually. One of my friends, I've met him several times. We've done a few chats together. His name's Scott Wilson, and Scott made this show called Departures with his 3 buddies, another presenter, and then his cameraman.
Good name.
Yeah, and they made I think they made 40 episodes, like 1-hour episodes, traveling all around the world. They spent years just traveling all around, and it was fully funded by this Canadian company, and that was a long time ago.
What a gig, man.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it was a shoestring budget, just the 3 of them. They did the whole thing, but the stories were nice. It was really authentic, and you got to support your fellow Canadians. But he's super famous in Canada because the 40 hours of stuff is still on loop in Canada because no one's done anything even close to that ambitious before. But I've never had a Canadian broadcaster even think about kind of championing my work, which is very strange.
And I assume you had an active campaign to do just that.
I did, but so the way Canada works is the government is heavily involved in content creation and storytelling in Canada, and the broadcasters in Canada
Sounds like China.
lean. It does, but so a lot of the broadcasters want the content they buy to be made by Canadians in Canada, who pay tax in Canada, who are part of the rebate system. So you've got this guy in Shanghai who's been living in China for 20 years, like me. I'm not part of the Canadian system. I'm not part of the tax system. I'm not part of the credits system. And then I come in and try to sell them shows. But if they take my show, they have to pay 100% of it in cash. Whereas if they take a show that's been made in Canada by a Canadian producer who's part of the Canadian system, maybe they only have to pay 50 cents on the dollar, and then the government will chip in for the rest because it's Canadian content and they subsidize Canadian content. So that's how it kind of works in Canada. If I got that wrong, just make some notes in the
they've
down below.
Some things since you tried last. I think it's time to give it another shot.
No, I mean, it's the same system, man. It really just hasn't changed. And if you're not, like if you're, the thing is, if you're not in Canada and you're not playing that game with the tax credits and everything like that, you literally have to be like an A-list star to break through. Like you have to be like a Bear Grylls or a Chris Hemsworth doing his Nat Geo series, because that'll air in Canada, and they'll pay top dollar for that stuff. But all the other stuff, they want to work through the Canadian credit. And I'm not a Chris Hemsworth or Bear Grylls,
Yet.
We're getting old, buddy. It's not 2013 anymore.
No, man, you're getting younger every day. You're getting younger every day.
I love it. Thank you. But so that's kind of the Canadian system playing out. So it's very convoluted and strange, but it's I've never had a Canadian broadcaster even like really ask me to do anything. I've pitched a lot. It's never really worked out.
You currently have the same agent?
Same agent selling my shows, yeah, and they've tried to sell it into Canada as well, and they haven't really had any luck. But now there's some streaming partners like Apple, like Amazon, like Tubi. Tubi is also in Canada, and like those are streaming partners where you can get revenue from. And of course, Netflix has like an office in Toronto, but they're looking for bigger productions. But even the stuff in Canada with Netflix that gets produced in Canada is part of that tax credit Canadian content system. So they're looking to take advantage of that too.
When people were looking at your portfolio of work and they were sort of scrutinizing these projects on an entertainment basis and eyes, and probably looking at the metrics and how many people were paying attention, how long they were watching, did you get any suggestions that would have allowed you to massage the way your process was, to make it more quote unquote entertaining? Have you changed anything along the way that has, you're like, okay, I always need to make sure I'm doing this to get more eyes in the first 30 seconds, etc.? Like, what have you done differently? What have you learned over this process?
I've done everything the same. So and really no one
is the thing.
Yeah. And really no one has been forthcoming about like comments. Like most of the time, so I mean, some people will say it's too slow, but if you're I made a TV series called Extreme Treks, right? Where I would walk across a desert that's 130 miles, and I would walk across over like 10 or 15 days, and I would have a 16 camel caravan, with a camel driver and his wife to help with the cooking and someone else to help with the camels and the bags. And we would just go.
You didn't ride the camels? You just walked the whole time?
Yeah, you got to walk.
How much weight did you lose?
A lot. Yeah.
Where did you poop? Like, and did you dig a hole in the sand and just cover it up?
Yeah, totally. But
I got to watch this.
I'll send you some links. But the thing about that is it was kind of a slow episode because you were soaking up like the desert life and the landscape and the culture and the people, and the camel driver's wife would sing every night when she cooked, and so we were kind of, it wasn't like this adrenaline like motorcycling kind of thing. It was a much softer journey, and each episode each has its own rhythm and its own its own pace. And I think you'd have to try to find that as a director. Like some episodes they go much faster. Some episodes you let the nature and everything kind of soak in a little bit. And what we weren't doing was what the mainstream broadcasters wanted, which was fake drama. Every 3 minutes there needs to be conflict. And we didn't like cut our scenes like super quick with multiple cameras to like feed the fucking Instagram and TikTok audience.
So you're adamant about not doing that, not even if it meant 1 million more people per week would see you and kind of catapult you into the higher ranges where, again, more eyes and no judgment either way, but I'm just curious, like, what are you willing to do to get to that next level?
Well, I haven't really had anyone say like, if you do it like this,
right,
we will do that. So like, and of course I have a back catalog of things to show, which is all kind of the way we've been doing it. But up until 2020, like there was plenty of money for me to make the shows I wanted and plenty of places to go. So I had people who were buying into what I was doing. But that now, since COVID, it's become hyper centralized and hyper celebrity focused. So it's become a lot more difficult. Like I was having a production meeting a couple weeks ago with someone here, and they were just like, look, in 2015, 16, 17, which was when I kind of had my great stretch from 2015 to 2020, I was super busy. It was great. Back then, like a broadcaster would take a $10 million production budget allocation that they would have, and they would put it into 10 storytellers. And then they would get 10 stories back, or 10 TV shows back, or 10 movies back. And then hopefully 1 or 2 or 3 of them would hit, and the rest would kind of fall by the wayside. And that was deemed,
cost of doing business. Yeah.
Right. That was deemed a success. But now they'll take that entire $10 million budget and make one thing with an A-list celebrity. And those 10 things, if you got, let's say, for example, if you got like 100 million views on 10 different projects, but if you put Chris Hemsworth in, give him, he'll get 150 million views. So all anyone cares about is just making the biggest splash possible by telling, any story with any A-list celebrity. Like if you look on TV now, it's like Chris Hemsworth, Zac Efron, the Aquaman guy, what's his name? Jason Momoa. Like these guys are all making TV. And it's easy because they just throw money at them, and they have the audiences built in already. So I'm wondering now if it's going to start to like switch back because people, I think, really are getting tired of watching celebrities fix their cars, cook fucking food.
I'll never get tired of that.
But if it does switch back and people want to find, more nuanced storytelling, then, there needs to be money for it. Now, I have had a few other people tell me, like, your entire genre is now on YouTube. Like YouTube is paying out $6 billion a year to creators. Fucking figure out a model, figure out some sponsors. But if you need to keep creating, like doing it for Discovery Channel or Travel Channel or BBC, I don't even think Travel Channel exists anymore. That's a dying model. And I'm interested in doing the YouTube kind of stuff, but I don't think the metrics work yet. I mean, obviously, Mr. Beast and people like that, like Yes Theory is another one that's based out of, I think they're in Venice. Like they've got a model that seems to be working for them, where they incorporate some sponsors and they're just getting millions and millions of views on YouTube. So it is possible. But for me, it's like building it up from scratch, because I've never been a big YouTuber. I mean, this will go on YouTube and things like that, but I've never been like, okay, we're going to Papua New Guinea for 2 weeks. My 2 camera guys, 30 grand worth of gear, a couple drones in case they break, flying everyone to the middle of the South Pacific, spending tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, coming back, editing it, and then just putting it on YouTube.
You should 100% do that. Seriously.
Maybe.
Like that's your next move, because as I understand it, that is the future of where everything long form goes. It was never built for the short content. So the stuff that's a minute, 3 minutes long, the little quick cuts that we've gotten used to with the other platforms are not really appropriate. Yeah. You can't be putting those little short things on YouTube and expecting them to do millions of views unless you're one of those people. But if you're trying to build, having that longer form content that people will just sit through and be like, man, this is fucking cool. I can't find this anywhere else.
Yeah.
How do I not know about this guy?
Yeah. It leads to a lot of speaking events, actually, like having the stuff on Tubi and Amazon and stuff like that, because people do pick it up and they're like randomly and they're like, oh, who's this guy? And then they do a couple of Googles and then they write you and be like, oh, I'm having an event like, in Q3, we need a speaker or something like that. So it does kind of resonate with the right people, but it's not like on the front page of Variety, where you're launching a 12 episode mega series with like National Geographic with a budget for promotion that's the same size as the production budget.
You don't need it to be, though.
No.
Like that's not you. That's never been the thing that you did. I mean, it's nice for the ego, but really you're trying to get it out to as many people as possible and make a living doing it. And so that would be falling into the category of the quick hit, but you're building this incredible legacy and you have this portfolio of like really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
It's different from a viral video,
completely.
That does great for a couple of days and then people never come back to. You're putting stuff that is going to be up there forever.
Yeah, and people still watch, Tough Rides China, which we filmed in 2010. People still watch it on all the various platforms, and they still, people still respond really well to it. So it's been, very satisfying to see, like, we did go out of our way to make, like, evergreen content, right? We don't include a lot of technology in our episodes. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about, like, what year it is or anything like that, because I want people to watch Tough Rides China and be like, oh, my God, these 2 guys rode motorcycles around China like during COVID or something.
Sure.
But actually it was more than a decade ago.
As far as the packaging goes, the music, you choose all the music?
Okay, so what I do is I go out into the field with two cameramen. One of them is my director of photography, Chad Ingram, and then the second guy kind of varies. For a while, it was Dan Milton, then it was Jesse Rosenberg. And so it'd just be the three of us, and I would produce, direct, and host. And I would also do all the pre-production, pick out the locations, interview the guides, plan the route. I would do all that stuff, and I love that. I would never change it for the world. And then we would go out and shoot. And then we would come back, and I would have a post-production supervisor. So for Extreme Treks, it was David Harris. He was based in New Zealand, so I would just ship him hard drives. And then for Expedition Asia, it was Zach Romeo, who's actually based here in LA. And then I would work through their networks to get a music composer and a sound mixer and a map and graphics guy or girl. And then the post-production supervisor would start to put everything together. And then I would start approving rough cuts, working on the script, doing the VO, planning the next episode. So it worked absolutely perfectly for like 6 or 7 years. Like we were just rolling, making 8 to 10 episodes a year in the most crazy places. And the post-production management on the back end was really slick. Like, I mean, at my core, I'm probably pretty OCD when it comes to like planning. Obviously I loved planning the trips and the adventures, but the back end stuff and just being super organized on that front is really important, because if you're not organized on the trip side, you're burning money, and if you're not organized on the backside, you're burning like houses, because the post-production is so much more expensive than going out into the field with two of your best friends who happen to be great cameramen and then going out and doing that.
What kind of organizational tools are you using these days? I'm sure everyone would love to know. Are you an old school like spreadsheet guy, or are you using newfangled tools for staying abreast of where you need to be and where all the moving pieces?
Yeah, I mean, it's just spreadsheets. It's really just about keeping track of money. Like it's, to be honest, like, you know, money coming in, money going out. Cause I had my own production company, right? And, you know, we didn't make it through COVID. But, you know, making sure that we had like deal flow. So that, again, this was another thing. Like once it's so hard to get going, it's like pushing a wheel. Like it's so hard to get it going, but once it's going, it starts to have its own momentum, right? So by year 3, year 4, year 5, like people are just throwing money at you. You're pitching. People are saying yes, like because you just flown in from here and you were just filming there, and like time is money, right? So if you look busy,
it's a good look.
Yeah, it's a great look, and people just give you money because you're busy and you're already making shit. So I guess you'll keep making stuff. So that was like a real thing. So since COVID, getting back into it from a standing start has been really difficult.
Okay, so the old way stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what the fuck are you going to do?
So now I have relocated to Los Angeles, and I love the city so far. It's been fun, and being able to reconnect with old friends has been amazing. And what I'm going to do is, the cost of doing 8 to 10 episodes a year at 46 minutes or whatever is quite expensive, because you need to shoot, 8 episodes a year, and then you have to edit 8 episodes a year. So when you think about that, you got to go to 8 countries, do 8 expeditions, and then on the back end, you got to do post-production on 8 episodes, which is like putting together 8 hours of content. So the way I'm going to start inching my way back into the space is I'm going to go out and make docs. So I'm going to go out and make 60 or 90-minute docs. I'm going to do more difficult and more strenuous trips, but for longer. So a typical
shit.
So a typical Extreme Treks episode would be 2 weeks. So a couple days to get to some fucked up place, and then 10 to 12 days doing something, climbing a mountain, walking across a desert, and then a day or 2 to get back. And that was kind of our thing. So we were 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for like 6 or 7 years, which was great. So now I'm going to, instead of doing just 2 weeks, maybe I'm going to try to find like a 4-week or a 6-week adventure. And then instead of turning it into episodic TV, I'm going to turn it into like a 60 or 90-minute doc, and then just put it through the film festival circuit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then of course I'm doing, podcasting and catching up with friends and having great conversations. And then I also want to get back into speaking. So in 2019, I did like 42 speaking events all around the world. And now that I'm here in the United States, I really want to build out like a one-man show where I can take on the road and like visit smaller towns, play theaters, the same way a stand-up comedian does their business, where they write material and then they travel around and go to clubs and book out theaters, and people pay to watch them. So I'm hoping
And what will be the why there? The power of travel, or like
The Power of Travel, a night of adventure with Ryan Pyle. I'll talk about life, difficulties, amazing moments. Of course, I have all the multimedia. I've got the photos, I got the videos, I got the whole thing, so I can keep it. So I can keep it quiet. I don't have to stand there with a microphone. I can have a huge screen above me, and I can bring
have you done
people.
TEDx?
I have done TEDx, but I did a speaking tour in the United States in like 2016 or 17. I had
You
this.
call me.
I started in New York. So this agent put it together, and he actually did a really good job with it. He put together like a travel and adventure series, and he basically lined up, and I wasn't the only speaker that went through this network. Like he would put people through like once a month, and he chose me to do it. It was great. So it was 22 speaking events in a month in like 26 cities, in 26 days or 28 days. And I just basically rented a car in New York and stopped all the way through the United States, all the middle places that no one goes, the flyover states, did them all there, and then ended up in San Diego, 22 events later. And it was beautiful. I got to meet people from all across the country. Like, my adventures were very well received. People were very respectful. People were in awe, because obviously a lot of Americans don't travel internationally. A lot of Americans don't have passports.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, a lot of them really liked it. And I was just like, wow, if I can like recreate that network, or find a way to market myself where people will pay $5, $10, $20, to spend an evening with me, maybe 2 shows a night or something like that. Like that would be a really nice way to complement the podcast, and then also to keep me busy in between the docs, because you can't really do more than like 1 doc a year. Assuming people even want
that attitude.
Assuming that people want to watch a doc of me doing something at all. Like that's the other thing too. Like most docs are about third-party people doing things or whatever. But I really just want to take, my extreme treks or my tough rides content and keep doing it, but maybe do it in docs and see what the market says. Like people will either love it or hate it. I don't mind.
Have you thought about sexing it up a little bit and like trying to set a new Guinness World Record as part of the, the through line for the doc? Like make it a little bit harder. You're talking about making these things harder and longer duration. I mean, you can make them comically harder. You could have like rocks in your shoes for the entire desert crossing.
That's not me though.
It's not?
I think I'm a more,
It may come to that. So
I think, no, I definitely want to keep it, keep the integrity of it, and keep and maintain the respect for the place I am and the people I'm working with there and the local people and things like that. Like, I wouldn't want to create like an Idiot Abroad kind of thing where, that Ricky Gervais show where they sent their small friend, midget, whatever the current term is that won't get you canceled. They sent little people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He sent this guy all around, and he was just a total Muppet, right? And that was the show. And he'd never been anywhere. He didn't know anything. And I wouldn't want to go in that direction.
Now, what's the longest water fast you've done?
What do you mean by water fasting?
I just mean water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just drinking water.
Just water. Yeah. You've never done that?
Never done that.
So if you want one of your adventures, your extreme treks to be a little bit more extreme, stop eating.
Stop eating.
Yeah.
I mean, is that just an LA thing?
No, that's an everywhere thing. I think fasting is one of the oldest forms of self-healing. Animals do it when they're sick. Your pets will do it too. Like they just, you'll notice them not touching food. They just won't eat. I first heard about it in 2015. A guy named Dom D'Agostino was studying the effects of fasting, I believe was it like diabetes or something? I'm losing that train of thought, but eventually the idea is peripherally, and clearly I'm out of my pay grade, but cancer cells feed on glucose. And so one of the side, effects of this is that you're evidently starving the precancerous cells in your body, which we all have after age 30. Mm-hmm. In addition to giving your organs a break, basically stopping your reliance on things like caffeine, which the physiological effects of coming off of caffeine is really uncomfortable for me, at least. Do you drink caffeine?
Yeah, I drink coffee. Yeah, for sure.
Like all day long?
I'll have 1 or 2 coffees. I like to have a coffee in the morning, and then I love to have like one after lunch. It's like part of a digestive kind of thing, which I've kind of settled into a routine like.
Have you ever stopped?
on some of the adventures, yeah, I've stopped, and you know, you get the headaches and the whole thing. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. So the fast, you get kind of the benefit of giving your body a break, coming off of the things that you have a physiological addiction to, like caffeine is the big one, maybe for some people, alcohol.
Drink in the evening's nice.
And then you definitely, yeah, for sure. And then you definitely get to ketosis, where your body is, you know, using fat for energy in the simplest terms, I think. And that's a wholly unique feeling, you know. I think most people, the term hangry, you know, I don't really like that term. I feel like it's pretty weak. If you are a mean, evil person because you missed a meal, like, you have work to do.
You're a mean, evil person when you're eating too. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a stoic, you know, virtue to be able to fast and be able to go without, but also to help, you know, re-regulate your body to get back to a base where you are modulating your insulin sensitivity. Most people lose a bunch of weight. Like I typically lose 10 to 12 pounds over 5 days.
And you just drink water for 5 straight days.
Now, if you don't want to come off of coffee because you need the cognitive effects for whatever, you can have black coffee. It's not the purest way to do it, but I don't think it makes a huge difference. But man, it's potent. I do it twice a year, after my birthday and after Thanksgiving, which, as you know, in America is basically just an excuse to overeat.
Yeah, no, wow, that's amazing. Because you've always kept yourself very fit. Like, you've always been big.
Not always, but yeah.
As long as I've known you. I don't know what the hell you were doing before 2013 when I didn't.
Oh man, I was merry, M-E-R-R-Y. I like to make merry. And there was a period where I competed in powerlifting in 2009, I think, and then bodybuilding in 2010. And yeah, I got up to like 230, and I'm typically like 185. It was really hard for me to break that 200-pound barrier. And so I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like pouring olive oil all over the top of a pizza. Like, really the wrong way to do it, but just getting as many calories as possible.
Yeah, I've been there. I mean, when I was playing sports in university, like the
weight gain.
Yeah. They were just basically saying, like, you will not be able to eat enough for the next 8 months. So don't think about dieting. Don't think about eating healthy, because you're training 4 hours a day.
Sure.
So just eat as much shit as you can every day. Like, because the biggest problem is that when you're on a calorie deficit and you're basically training like a professional athlete, it just destroys your muscles, your energy. Like, you just lose everything. So if you're not eating at least as much as you're burning, your body is just deteriorating in front of you, and that's how you get injured.
100%. The only thing I would change now, based on what we know, is like, I can never advocate just eating complete trash, you know, just to get your caloric needs. If it fits your macros, I know it has a lot of proponents, but I just think from a basic health perspective, what we know about health, like, just because you're getting 200 grams of protein of, you know, like Slim Jims, you know, that's not optimal, you know, compared to fish, chicken, rice and beans, like really just whole foods.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the one piece that's left out, and a lot of young people are looking at influencers who are in really great shape, and most likely if they're in out of this world shape, it has something to do with performance enhancing drugs, but all they're seeing is them eat all kinds of trash. And it's like, it doesn't matter because I'm getting my protein, fat, and carbohydrate, you know, totals for the day. But
from this vitamin, who I'm pitching to you now, like, the amount of supplements selling is ridiculous.
Supplements too, but just real food. Most people don't even eat real food because it's not convenient, and maybe it's not always available.
Yeah. So I'm curious about your journey before we met. Like, where are you from originally?
So my father was military. I was born in Fort Hood, Texas, which the name has since changed.
Yeah, someone mentioned that. They changed it to like a normal name that's not like Fort Hood, like a military-based name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fort Hood, there's a lot of like suicides there.
From veterans?
Didn't have a great reputation. Well, anyway, that's where I'm from. Now, I was born there, and then we moved to the Washington, D.C. area for 4 years. My father was in military intelligence. Then to Kansas, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for a year. Then Germany for 4 years, Heidelberg, Ansbach.
I've been to Heidelberg and saw the former U.S. bases. They've turned it into like a art gallery space now. It's so
they turned into an art gallery.
yeah. I filmed an episode of The Nomad, which is another show that I have in Heidelberg, Germany during COVID. So I got stuck in Istanbul. Yeah. Yeah. So I got stuck in Istanbul. Sorry for the aside. I got stuck in Istanbul and I got out and then I was like, okay, I'm just going to film in Europe all summer because once I can get into Europe, I can travel around freely and drive everywhere basically. So I filmed in Switzerland. I filmed in Heidelberg, Germany. I filmed in Poland, Tatra Mountains. And then I was in Malta, Croatia, Montenegro, the whole thing. But Heidelberg, Germany was one of our episodes. And
Did you go through the castle?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I see the footprints.
The footprints and the huge wine cellar. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But I loved Heidelberg because the old US base, they turned it into an art installation. So they have all the old dormitories with big like murals of artwork. And then you guys had like a big Walmart on the base, like a huge grocery store, like an everything store. I think it was a Walmart. And they turned that into a massive art installation. And we filmed it. I'll show you the episode. It's fantastic. It was actually really well done.
That's wild. That is so interesting to hear. I wonder how my dad would feel about that. I can't wait to tell him.
And of course, Heidelberg has the history, right? So Mark Twain spent a lot of time in Heidelberg.
That's right.
Yeah. And I hired a Mark Twain impersonator to come and have a beer with me at a bar, just to kind of like build it in, right? Because it was quite nice. I love Heidelberg, Germany. Will always, has a good place in my heart. That was a beautiful episode.
That was where I really, I kind of fell in love with knights and the medieval. I mean, because there's a fucking castle on the horizon, right?
That they refused to rebuild, which I love.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
So I interviewed as part of the show, like a historian of Heidelberg University, obviously, because the university there is super famous. So I got a historian to come and chat with me and interview her at the castle, and she was telling me like that the castle was ruined, and then
was it fire? Like what was it?
It was fire. I think it was. I can't remember if it was like attacked and then it was a fire or if there was just a fire. I can't really remember the history. I need to watch the episode again. But the thing I remember is that she said that they consciously decided, the government of Heidelberg, the municipality of Heidelberg decided not to rebuild the castle as a way of showing, what had happened to the castle, but that it was kind of beautiful as a ruin, instead of being rebuilt and shiny. And I always loved that.
What's that Japanese concept with pottery called? It's the same thing where if something breaks, then you don't actually repair it perfectly because the imperfection is part of the beauty.
Absolutely, yeah. And they have like what they do in Japan is like, and I think this was on Ted Lasso. This was in Ted Lasso.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. They take pottery and they put the pieces back together and they rebuild it. And then keep using it because, just because something's broken doesn't mean it can't work or something like that. And that was in Ted Lasso, there was an episode where the football owning lady goes to a psychic and she explains this process. But that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, I remember. So yeah, Heidelberg was elementary school, and then Ansbach, and then we came back to the States. Arizona this time. Southeast
Arizona.
About 45 miles from the border, maybe. There's a military base there called Fort Huachuca. It's also Army intelligence. Mm. And then I did university in Texas, just north of Austin.
What was it like moving around that much as a kid? Like different schools all the time? Like were you trying to play sports like that? That affects not only your social life of having to change friends all the time, but also too if you have a sporting career like I played basketball and you're moving schools and having to meet new coaches and have new teammates all the time, that must have been very difficult.
Yeah, Ryan, I think probably I used to think it was a huge advantage. I'd be like, yeah, but it just means I can adapt and start over anytime. And that's been like a theme in my entire life ever since.
Yeah.
And I don't think I really put it together like this might have had some deleterious effects, because I was just always like, all right, well, we'll start over. We'll just rebuild. And I think, mastery wasn't something that I was ever really interested in because it's like, well, if you go as far as you can and you run up against a brick wall, you can just start over and get really good at something else. Which is kind of, what I've done in many ways. And I think the other thing is relationships. You know, those lifelong relationships that so many people have. Oh, we went to kindergarten together and we're still best friends. Like,
We don't have those.
yeah, no. It's like, man, I really envy people that have those kind of strong relationships, because as you get older, you realize it's so much more difficult to create new ones and build really strong ones like that.
It's really hard to make friends when you get older, isn't it? I don't know why. Do we just become less, like, more shitty and like more judgmental?
Well, it's a really good question, and I've thought about it a lot, because when I first moved to Los Angeles, I thought, and I may have said this in our episode 10 years ago, I thought it was, the loneliest big town I'd ever been to, because everybody seemed to be so focused on getting to their next step. It wasn't like I came from Austin. Austin's like, everybody's in a band. I was in like 3 bands. So were all my friends. Everybody was in the arts in some way. And you would go, if you weren't playing your own show, you went to somebody else's. It was just like a big community. It felt more like a community. And it's not fair to say that LA is not that, because it's got plenty of that too. But like, coming from Austin and not finding my place right away, I was like, damn, this is like, there's more people here than ever, kind of like New York City. But I even found New York City easier to find fast friends than LA for whatever reason. And I thought about it, and I think a lot of it's like the silo that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, you're packed in together in the subway, just a little bit more humanity. In LA, you're all contained in a separate vehicle. Everybody's a driving town.
Yeah.
So you spend most of your time in your space and then moving to the next space inside of this little vessel. Yeah, you're next to a bunch of people, but you have all these little safety walls where you can scream and sing and do whatever that you need to do as an individual, but you're not really connecting with anybody.
Do you think that people in LA are just more self-centered and more focused on their own lives and their own careers more than anywhere else in the world? Because I definitely feel that.
In certain pockets, that's true, just because of the entertainment industry. But how can you say that people here are more focused on themselves than in, say, Wall Street, where finance, all they care about is, X, Y, Z? I don't think, compared to other places, it's like more self-centered. I think certain people that you come up against, that will be the same. And the thing that I always heard when I came to town was like, you'll be at a bar or whatever, and you're talking to somebody and they're looking to see if there's somebody more important behind you or around you, that they can get something from.
That happens when I go to production.
Yes.
I'm one-on-one with an executive producer, and they're looking to see who's going to come in the door behind me.
Yeah, they're just like, is that door open?
Oh, one time I was at Amazon, and I was having a production meeting with someone, and fucking Sly Stallone came in behind me.
Into your meeting?
No, I was in like a side meeting, but it was like a glass.
You can see him in the green room, which is all glass.
And then Sly Stallone came in, and then the guy was like, "Oh, excuse me, I gotta go there." He was out there for like 20 fucking minutes or something like that. And he comes back and he's like, "What were we talking about again?"
Be like, "I'm not getting this one."
Rocky just stole my thunder. But he's tiny.
Oh yeah, he's small.
Yeah.
But he's in great shape, and he's made his own life, and is a really interesting artist in his own way.
Did you see the Netflix doc on him? It was beautiful.
I don't watch anything.
You really nothing? Did you watch you got to watch the Arnold one.
I read Total Recall, and I used to run into him all the time at the Gold's Gym, in Venice Beach, and I'll get around to it eventually. But now I have 2 kids, and it's like I don't have time to watch anything. If I want to do something and get ahead in one of the many, irons I have in the fire, I can't be spending time watching Netflix and shit. Like, I just can't do that.
That's true. Yeah, time is an issue. What did you study at when you went to Texas, University in Texas? Where'd you go?
So I went to Southwestern University, which is a private liberal arts school. And what did I study there?
Some philosophy, poetry.
That would have been great. That would have been very, very specific. I was a double major in communications and Spanish. And so I spent a semester in Seville and learned to speak Spanish, and then came back and promptly didn't speak it for 20 years until I found out that, my wife was going to have twins. And then it was like, I got to have bilingual kids, so I guess I got to do this.
There you go, right?
Started listening to podcasts and reading in Spanish, and it's worked out well. Like, I only speak to them in Spanish. And over the years, that has gone from a very primitive level to, pretty decent.
So it came back?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that the plasticity of your brain is such that, those neural pathways are there and you're just kind of like finding them again.
And as you get older, they die.
Yeah, if you don't keep flexing them.
Yeah.
And so part of the problem is that I only speak to 5.5-year-olds in Spanish. So I've had to supplement that with what I'd love to recommend to you. Speak another language?
So I learned French when I was young.
Because Mandarin, obviously.
And I picked up some Chinese over 18.
Over 18, there's some.
Yeah. But not nearly as fluent as I should be.
I recommend italki, and I'm not sponsored by them, but I have been using them, and it allows you to find a native speaker who's typically a teacher, and that's their job. And, you pay anywhere from like $7 to $20 an hour, probably much higher for the most revered teachers, and you focus on speaking or whatever you want to work on. Basically a tutoring session, Zoom. My tutors are all in Spain because that's the Spanish I learned, but I also spend a lot of time in Mexico, so it's like that'll be my next thing. But like a couple hours a week, man, it does wonders.
It's interesting.
Because otherwise you're kind of stuck at this very basic communicative level, which is fine for getting around. But if you want to have any sort of nuance to your personality and the way that you speak and the way that you think in another language, you have to understand idioms and vernacular and all these things that, aren't necessarily on page 11 of a French textbook.
Yeah, that can be quite difficult. That's interesting though. So it's great. So you've really wholeheartedly put yourself back in that space.
Yeah, man, I love it. I should never have neglected it for as long as I did. And to be completely transparent, now that I think about it, like I came back, I finished school, and then my first job was a teaching position in the Austin Independent School District. And I was teaching 8th grade ESL.
Interesting.
I'm 22 years old. And that was really tricky because some of those 14-year-old kids had like thicker, fuller beards than I did. I was like, oh man, you guys are way manlier than I am. Should I really be teaching you? It's those 14-year-olds. Some of them are early bloomers. That's for
monsters.
Yeah, just savages.
Did you play any sports at when you were in University of Texas?
No. I was competitive in I played competitive soccer, and then once I got to new high school, I changed to tennis because I really fell in love with tennis, and then I was competitive in that. We went to the state finals my junior year, and then my senior year we moved again. And so I was like, man, this tennis team shit, I'm going to start wrestling. So I started wrestling, and
that's interesting. That's a big transition going from tennis to, full body contact.
I've always appreciated martial arts. Wrestling is got to be the hardest sport there is. Guys and gals that do wrestling just endure tremendous amounts of grueling training just in order to get to that really short. Like a tennis match, that could be long. You got a lot of time to fuck up and then come back, and there's a lot of psychology involved. Wrestling is very immediate, and
Did you ever see The Foxcatcher, the movie with?
Oh man, I heard it was great.
Yeah,
I've heard people rave about it.
Maybe
amazing. I did see that. Was that Channing Tatum?
Yeah, Channing Tatum and Steve Carell.
Steve Carell.
Yeah.
I did.
Incredible.
I saw that at South by Southwest, 2012.
Yeah.
I think that's where it premiered.
Yeah, it was beautiful, beautiful wrestling movie, but just dark, like fucking dark. But Channing Tatum was ripped for that. Like he was
in great shape, and I know he trained hard for that. So with wrestling, I wish I had a better wrestling story, but like I was going in wrestling. I was like, okay, this is my thing now. And then I got cast in our school's production of Little Women.
So when did drama become an interest?
That's my senior year. That's when it really ratcheted up, and I was like.
So what, you just decided to try out for like the university play or the school play?
Well, the school play, senior, so 12th grade, 17 or 18. And I was like, I'm going to start acting now. And I got cast in that. And then I was like, now I'm going to go to school and be an actor. I had always wanted to do it from like 3rd grade.
Really?
Yeah,
so
3rd grade.
So even traveling abroad, even being in Germany, you still had this acting bug.
Germany is where I decided. I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I think I saw Top Gun, and I was like, that's the shit I want to do.
Top Gun was transformative, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It was like 88 or 87. When was that?
86.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I want to be like Tom Cruise behind some sort of, screen where he and Kelly McGillis are French kissing, and you could see the tongues kind of doing this, and I was like, oof, that's hot.
Yeah.
I'm going to
That's a great movie.
So I didn't really have an opportunity until my senior year of high school to actually be in acting. I think in 8th grade, I may have done like a summer theater thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that was a chance. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this play, and then I'm going to start looking at a trajectory where I do this in college. And so then when I went to college, I was a theater major. And
along with the Spanish and the communications.
well, yeah, no, first I was a theater major.
Oh.
First. And I changed like 6 times.
That's awesome.
I also got heavily into cannabis cultivation and use and music. And so I got to university and was like, with all due respect to the theater folks out there, because I love theater, but theater kids, I didn't really identify because I was half of a meathead, right? Like I loved wrestling and athletics. And at that time I started really paying attention to bodybuilding. But also I had this artistic side, this creative side. But I didn't really like the theater kids at college. So I started hanging out with the musicians and the dope smokers. And that was basically my trajectory for the next 10 years. I pursued music and played in so many different bands while I lived in Boston.
What instrument did you play?
Guitar, bass, drums, vocals. I did everything from singer-songwriter stuff to hip-hop iterations to metal to progressive stuff.
You're like a Swiss Army knife of music.
Mm-hmm. I still, like, that is, when I do my next film project, that is independent and that I conceive, like, I will score it, because that's something that is closer to me, more precious to me than anything else, is just being able to, when you try to convey an idea, and that's why I asked you about the music for your show,
mm-hmm.
in many ways, like, how to describe this? A show is oftentimes a group effort, especially with yours. You got all these moving parts coming together to make something that you hope will be great.
Mm.
What is usually not as great, not usually, but oftentimes not, is the single vision of a person, right? And I think that's what sort of everyone can agree is kind of going away. There are far fewer auteurs because you have big data and analytics pointing to these metrics that need to be hit for everything. So you hire a staff of writers. You have a group of production designers. You have more than one person working on all these things. In my opinion, that kind of muddles the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the idea of a singular vision carried all the way through. In fact, I heard Rick Rubin talk about a piece of art as like
the famous music producer.
The famous Rick Rubin, yeah. Talk about art as like a page in your diary. And no one can disagree with like a page of your diary, because that's you. That's your idea that you're putting out there, but it's for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for a group of people that are then looking at it according to all these metrics of what's successful right now in 2023 on TikTok or.
Yeah. I feel the same way about my TV shows.
Right.
Yeah. My stories, my journeys, my art.
And I think that's probably what has been able to carry you through, is this undying vision of like unbending vision of, hey, I want to do this thing that I am conceiving of, and not taking everyone's suggestions into account. And that's why I asked you about that earlier. Like, those are the things that give you integrity as an artist, is doing the thing that you see in your mind. And the hardest part is conveying that in the most accurate way possible.
Yeah.
That's hard, because whatever you have in your mind, the music may not come out just right, or the execution isn't just right, or the packaging or the editing or the scenario or the light or whatever. But trying to get as close as possible to that without being dissuaded by someone else is really hard.
It is, and especially in this town where everyone is trying to catch a trend. And then, you have a seasoned TV host and producer like myself, who goes into a production meeting or something like that, and you're sitting across from someone who's in their 20s, and they're telling you like how it needs to be. But I've been in those meetings for 15 years, and I've rejected most of it. And I still do the same stuff, and I still have an audience, and I still have a career. Whereas maybe, that person, had that job for 3 months, or 6 months or a year and then move to something else and probably isn't even in TV anymore.
Right.
So it's just like, how am I putting my career and the way people see me, and how am I carrying that integrity into these meetings and into my content, and still trying to be respectful for all these voices out there that are telling me what's what? Because you see it on, like, LinkedIn is the best thing in the world, because you can be like, oh yeah,
I don't know about the best thing,
but you can see people who talk shit about you 6 years ago. They didn't like your show, they didn't like you, blah 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 blah, and then they're not even in TV anymore.
Right.
And it's just like, oh well, I took what you said to me really seriously, and it really affected me. You didn't like this, you didn't like that, you didn't like that, but it's like, but I'm still making shows, and you're not even in this business anymore. So
that's the ultimate fuck you. I love it.
Yeah, but it happens all the time. So like, that's this thing about just not caring what people say at all, because if you start caring what anyone says about your vision, you're going to totally lose your way, and you're going to lose your way by people who aren't even committed to this business for their, in a lifelong kind of passion, which is insane. Like, why would a musician, if you're a musician and you're going to play music until you fucking die, like for 60 years you have a career in music, why would you listen to one record producer who's only going to be a record producer for 3 years, and you're in this business for 60? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So there's all these gatekeepers out there that want to tell you what to do, but they're all temporary. You just have to wait for them to rotate through.
Yeah, I mean, for I 100% agree with you. For me, the purpose of art is to execute whatever you have in your mind as completely and as comprehensively as possible. That's it. And that's interesting that you said that. It reminded me of, in 2014, I was a painter. And
why the air quotes?
Well, because it was only for 1 year.
Yeah.
And so the real painters that are listening, if any, will be like, that's not a fucking painter. You dabbled. You're a dilettante. Well, I was represented by a gallerist, and I achieved all this in a very short period of time, but it was because I was desperately committed to this idea. While we were in pre-production for a short film, I was trying to get the director to better understand via some very stylized storyboards, what I wanted to achieve, because I had written this piece. And these stylized storyboards became sort of the template for these large-scale paintings that I would do. So then I did this multimedia installation of the paintings that I had done in black, white, and red. I was enamored with that sequence, that scheme. Paintings, plus the videos playing in the background, plus the soundtracks playing. So it's sort of this multi-sensory experience of the film. And shortly thereafter, a gallery offered representation in New York, and I was like, okay, great. And what I quickly saw was that they zeroed in on one of the pieces, and they're like, we think this will be the thing that is successful. Can you start making more of this?
Making more like that.
Right.
Like not replications, but some things that were similar.
How do you see it any other way?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if I compromise now, then you can see, with all due respect to the painter of light, Thomas Kincaid, becoming someone like the painter of light, Thomas Kincaid. I'm the painter of triangles and shapes, Thomas Huisking. Like you quickly become the thing that you have a little bit of taste of success for. It's why people are typecast. It's anything else. And if you really resist that as an artist, I think it's sad, because it embittered me on that. I was like, I wish I would have carried it on further, maybe change representation, maybe went a different direction immediately. But what I saw it as was, you will be packaged in some way by some person, and that will be the expectation moving forward. So in 2015, I decided to start something different.
The theme is coming through here.
Yeah. In I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Didn't like that.
So why the fuck would you do something you don't like?
Right. Well, I mean, I love painting. I love making art. I love the creative process. I do it all the time, still every single day.
Until the business gets in the way, right?
Until the business gets in the way. And in some respects, it's a very naive way to look at it, and to stay broke if you're, offered a boatload of money to go one single direction. But then the next year, I spent the entire year focused on a company called Plants for Lunch. And the entire crux was, if we just get people to eat one meal per day that's plant-based. I'm not a vegan, but I can see the benefit of what this would do to the food chain, the healthcare system, people's health in general, education,
The environment.
Mm-hmm. If we could just substitute one meal, lunch, when people come back from lunch, having to caffeinate, having to feel like shit, lay down, whatever. Here's this opportunity. It had all these benefits. I could give them to you in 2015, but now I've abandoned it. I spent an entire year doing that and found an investor that was, like, you're right. This is the thing. This is the thing that will change. And then it was going to be, we're going to change school lunches and make them, it was very moonshotty. That
That's awesome though.
I still believe in it. I still believe in it. I still preach it to people that are trying to change, in a very short period of time, making this changes. There is no downside to eating more plants and in the middle of the day. Like, I just don't see it.
Yeah. Lighter is always better.
Yeah. And what's the phrase in Okinawa? Hara hachibu? You only eat until you're like 80% full, and then
right. Yeah. When we were doing our motorcycle trips, it was huge not to have big lunches, because then you'd be falling asleep on your bike in the afternoon. Yeah, it's really dangerous. So we would, sometimes we wouldn't even stop for lunch. We would just have some fruit and things like that just to keep pushing through, because the roads are so dangerous. Like in India, for example, you need to be on it every second you're on the bike, or you're going to get hit by someone or hit a cow or something. So we would go out of our way to avoid big meals, because we just couldn't have a lunch coma and still be effective in the afternoon, because we're trying to get places before dark, and we need to get to the hotel, and we don't want to ride at night. These are things that we set out to try to do beforehand to keep, to stay safe on the road. And not eating lunch was a huge part of that.
Still, you must have burned a ton of calories, right? So you had to eat like crazy at night.
Eat like crazy at night, fruit during the day, things that were, you had to peel, right? Because it would be a little safer to eat. But that was a huge part of our strategy for staying alive for 60 days in the country with the most dangerous road traffic.
Wow. So, okay. So.
Sorry for that tangent.
No, that's so awesome. I moved to LA in 2012. I met you the following year. I moved here to be an actor because in Austin, things were great. And I sort of, I had done this big production of August Osage County, which is a stage play by Tracy Letts. And it was the first one in Austin, first production of it.
And this was after you graduated from university. This is, you were doing.
In 2003, I graduated from university in 2000. Maybe you should edit that out. And
that was 2001. We're the same age.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when I taught 8th grade ESL. And I was like, man, this, now I'm like, Ryan, guess what happened? So then the year we were there was the year the No Child Left Behind Act was instituted in Texas. And what that did was take away all of the teacher's incentive to create curriculum, because schools were being funded based on how successful these standardized tests were. Well, all my kids were 8th grade ESL, so most of them didn't speak English even at a basic level.
Which means they couldn't take any standardized tests. Yeah.
So we were the funding for our school, which will go unnamed, was very low. Mm-hmm. The year I was there in 2000 was the first year they had computers in their school. And I had computers in elementary school in Germany.
Let's not get into too big a differentiation between Europe and the U.S. because Europe wins every time.
Well, but it was an American school. It was a military base. American school.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the military is much better funded.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So that changed, and so I got into teaching. That changed halfway through the year. So I got into teaching, and I was like, man, this is fucking cool. I get to use my Spanish a little bit, hopefully, and I'm doing a good thing, and I can work on music in the evenings. I'm 22 years old. World's my oyster. I'm getting paid good money for a 22-year-old. Mm-hmm. And Austin was just dirt cheap at the time. Now it's, full of billionaires and has F1. But back then, Austin was weird.
Yeah. Joe Rogan changed it all.
It's all Joe's fault.
And Matthew McConaughey. He moved out there first, actually. Then he bought the football team, and he was doing the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really started changing towards the late 90s, early 2000s, but really demonstrably in maybe the 2010s.
But even I think even just during COVID, I think there's been a huge exodus.
Yeah. Everyone moved out there because
Yeah.
and Joe Rogan definitely had a lot to do with that, and Elon too.
Yeah.
Where was I? Oh, so I left that, and then in 2003, so then I sort of just grew some cannabis and played some music for a while, and then in 2003 I went to New York City, and I was modeling with Boss Models. And then I went to Paris for a little bit and came back to Texas. 2000. I'm not going to go through each year because each year is totally different. We don't want to.
What was modeling in New York and Paris like as a man?
It was such an interesting experience, especially if that's not all you aspire to, which that wasn't for me. I
just used it as an opportunity to travel a bit?
No, I had a band that one of the band members, two of them actually, one was a finance guy and the other was like a classically trained bass player. And he was working at Dell Computers at the time. And neither of them wanted to tour. All I wanted to do was tour. I was like, let's fucking take this show on the road. This will be so fun. We'll live like, dirty old rock stars. It'll be like Henry Rollins Get in the Van thing. That was very romanticized to me. And they didn't want to do it. So I was like, all right, how am I going to get my demo into the hands of some music executive? This is 2003, right?
Yeah.
So
your plastic tape. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had a CD. We had CDs.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'll just go to New York where they're all there. How am I going to get to New York? Well, I'll just get in good shape and go be a male model.
That was the thinking.
No one ever told me that. I knew a lot of guys that it's like, people told me I should be a model my whole life. No one ever told me to be a model. I was like, this is my plan and that's what I'm going to do. So I got in really good shape, sent some pictures in to the top agencies, and boss was like, yeah, come on out.
That's fantastic. That's so random.
Yeah. And then it wasn't working. And so I was like,
what does it mean to not work? Like, what does it mean when the modeling career is not working?
You go to castings and you go to castings and you go to castings, and some of them are a little bit demeaning, and at least they were in, 2003, the people that I was getting sent to go see, and some of them weren't. So don't get the wrong impression.
Mm-hmm.
Some are big clients like Macy's and what have you.
And these were for like ad campaigns, like posters, billboards,
everything you
like
can imagine.
Yeah.
So like editorial, catalog, and showroom, which I didn't even know about. I was like, what the fuck is showroom? Showroom is where you go in, and I have been out of this game for a very long time, so I don't know if it's the same now, but showroom, you would go in and you're basically fit size, you're a fit model, you are medium. So right off the rack, medium looks like it's tailor-made for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like this shirt is a medium. I'm a medium,
Yeah.
And
so they would basically design their collections around you, and you would
not me.
Yeah.
But when they send their collections to say Bloomingdale's, they would have all this stuff, and then you would have all these buyers from around the country for their specific departments and their regions: Texas, Florida, Southern California, Washington. They all have different kind of data that shows that people are buying this or not. And so you would be there for a week trying on all these different clothes and having them, and then walk out in front of the clients and they'd be like, what do you think about this? And I'd be like, I would never wear this.
And that was the whole thing.
And they were like, hey, Thomas, can you tone down the fucking, I would never do this. Just say you like it all. And I was like, okay, I like it all.
Yeah. And they'll bring you back next week.
Dude, it was such good money for 8-hour days for like 2 weeks. And then you would do that multiple times per year.
Yeah, for each season,
for
right?
Every collection. Yeah. I mean, that was far more lucrative than like editorial. It was just like, oh, this will get you out there and help build your book. But I'm not really an editorial guy. I'm a little bit too normal looking,
And this is also too like before Instagram and before like most social media too. So like,
yeah, well before any of that shit.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to parlay it into anything else. But I did do a pretty badass toilet paper campaign.
Very nice.
Yeah. It's called Renova. I don't know if you can find it on the internet, but it's a Portuguese toilet paper company. And they got all kinds of fancy toilet papers, like black toilet paper.
Oh.
Can you imagine? What a gamble.
What a gamble.
I know. So you just put that in the guest bathroom.
Keep them guessing.
That's right. And they did all kinds of colored toilet paper. But the idea was to shoot this toilet paper campaign like a fragrance ad. And that's exactly what we had. With the photographer's name is Francois Rousseau, incredible photographer, very cinematic feel. And we shot for like 3 days in Paris. That was like the big money gig. I was like, you're going to go to Paris for 3 days to carouse in your underwear with this beautiful woman.
And have a toilet nearby.
Yeah, there's always a toilet in the background of the shot. You establish the toilet paper roll with just a little strip like this. I was 25, and it was so fun. It was like one of those indelible things from that time period. And that is really when I felt like I could do whatever the hell I wanted. It was like, well, I decided to be a male model, and I did this. And then, of course, by the end of that year, Ryan, because Boss Models was famous in 2003 for not paying its models.
Oh, really? So you had a bit of a lawsuit going on?
No, I never sued. There were some strong notes back and forth. I think I only received about half of that payout.
Oh, really? That's terrible.
Yeah. And then I think Boss Models New York has folded. I believe the founder, David Bosman, he passed away. And I came back from that experience, broke, spent all my money, loved it. Loved every minute of it, but there was a lot of misery and a lot of down and out in Paris and London vibes.
Yeah.
With the male model twists. And then I came back and wrote a book about it.
Oh, really?
Called Ordinary Savages. And
musician, author, male.
It was going great, Ryan, and I had some really good feedback from, some literary agents at the time. And then right around that time, I believe Bret Easton Ellis came out with Glamorama. And
what was that?
A book about a male model and this like crazy conspiracy, and it was really good. To be fair, Brett's book was far better than mine.
It was fiction or nonfiction?
Total fiction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in his inimitable style, and he's the writer of American Psycho and Less Than Zero. And so I had at the time Snoop Dogg's literary agent say, "This is good, you can write, but not yet." And so
that never got published.
So it didn't, and I kind of was like, well, this other book came out that's exactly like it and a lot better. I think I'll just let Sleeping Dogs Lie. I should resurrect it someday just to see what it's like, just to get in the head of my 25-year-old self.
I mean, I'm listening to your story riveted. Like it's pretty interesting, and I just don't know that world. So if you've got a nonfiction story or a fiction story based around what actually happened to you during those like 2 years, it's pretty interesting.
So what I did is I kept a journal every day, and I would come back at night and talk about like if I had a really degrading casting. Or a really, successful night in the town, I wrote it all down. I wrote all of it down.
And you still have those diaries?
And so that's what I used to adapt to the fictional narrative. And then I just started adding some fiction parts in to make it just far enough away from the guilty parties that no one was incriminated.
Sounds a little like Ernest Hemingway, like he just used his whole life to write about amazing stories that he was actually doing, and then just when it wasn't exciting enough, he just threw in a bit of fiction.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's pretty much what I did, just so that I could have a nice through line to the the conclusion. And so then I guess I just slept that after I got the news that, hey, this other very popular book's out. So that would have been 2005, and that's when I met Ashley, my wife, and we met at a bar. I had this idea where
in New York?
No, in Austin. I had come back to Austin and, came back to my place in Lake Travis, Lake House, with my girlfriend and, all of our music stuff, and say, okay, well, I guess we'll start another band and figure stuff out. I also want to open a bar because I love a bar. I love the celebration associated with a bar. What better environment than a place where people go to have fun and celebrate?
Well, you and I grew up in the Cheers era.
Right.
Where everyone knows your name.
Everyone knows your name. And it's just, it was so comforting, and through my 20s when I was in bars most of the time, I was like, well, I can do this better, So what I'll do is I'll start in the lowest position and learn all the positions. I'm going to bar back. I started as security. Can you imagine me? I'm like, yeah, go on.
There's no security here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I met my wife there. She was a bartender. I was the security. We said we both want to travel. We ran off to Costa Rica, and then we were together. The next year we moved to Korea. Taught
Korea.
Yeah, Seoul. I love Seoul.
Mhm.
Oh, especially then. I haven't really been back since 2006, but I love the idea, just theoretically, that 11 barbecue restaurants can be in a row next to each other
Mhm.
and coexist,
And they're all full.
and they're all great.
Yeah.
It's like,
South Korea is probably if you're a foodie, it's like there's no better place than South Korea. Like Shanghai, Beijing's pretty good, but Seoul, South Korea, Tokyo, Japan, like if you're a foodie, those are the best places.
what about Southeast Asia? Have you been through Thailand and Vietnam?
Yeah, I mean, I've filmed everywhere. Yeah, so I've been all through.
Those didn't make your list, though.
No, I think I prefer maybe a more northern food, a little more spicy, maybe more meat based. I think the further south you go, it's a little bit more rice and veg focused.
I don't know if that's true, Ryan. I think that Thai food is the hottest food I've ever had in my fucking life.
Really? Yeah.
And you definitely don't want to order spicy because you're a macho man in Thailand. Like that is a recipe for a bloody rectum.
So my favorite dish in China was mapu tofu, which is like tofu, which is bean curd, right? But I liked it. So in China, every province kind of has their own version of this dish. And my favorite version of it was from Hunan province, which is where Mao Zedong was born.
Mm-hmm.
And it's famous for that. And it's also famous for having really, really spicy food. So the tofu from Hunan province was super spicy. And I still love it to this day. Like I mean, there's a place on Sunset Boulevard that does really, really authentic mapu tofu and they add the spice on it as well. It's fantastic.
Have you been to the San Gabriel Valley? I think that's where you need to be going for the super authentic Hunanese cuisine.
Have not yet.
Yeah, man. There's a lot going on out there.
Okay.
Big communities.
So you went to Korea for what?
Yeah. So we're teaching for the Princeton Review. So we're teaching SAT prep. You familiar with the SAT?
Yeah. I took it. I almost went to university in the U.S. on a basketball scholarship, but I didn't work out, so I stayed at the University of Toronto.
Because you got hurt?
It just wasn't good enough. Like I don't know. I didn't have enough pop in my game. So, but I was very happy to have a place at the University of Toronto and played for 4 years and loved it. Teammates were amazing. Coach was amazing. But I did have ambitions of going to the United States to train and play. And but yeah, it didn't work out. I had a few offers, but it did
not as good as the University of Toronto, though.
I mean, they weren't full scholarships. Some of them were partial scholarships. Some of them were like the academic standards of the schools were just terrible, and that was always really important to me. So yeah, I just stayed, and it was easier to be closer to home, like and the family, could come and watch me play and stuff like that. So it was kind of nice. But I was in touch with like, Bowling Green University, maybe Rice University, which is in Texas. There were a few like D1 programs that I was chatting with at the time, but nothing really stuck. Because I wasn't big enough.
How tall are you?
I'm like 6'2", like 190 centimeters. But I wasn't big enough to like really get people excited. And then for my size, I wasn't explosive enough. So I was just kind of caught in the middle. And I did the best I could. Like, guys like Steve Kerr, Steve Nash, two of my heroes, about the similar size and build to me, obviously had great careers. So it can be done. But I just it never really worked out. But yeah, I had an amazing time though. But
athlete, that's legit.
Yeah, but then when you're done, it's sad, right? Because I really wanted to play for Team Canada, and I didn't get a chance to make that. And then I had dreams of playing abroad, maybe professionally, and didn't really get to pursue that. And actually, that's why I went to China. It's just because I was kind of lost, with having your whole life from 6 years old to 22 wrapped up in one sport.
That was the catalyst to go to China. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was it. Like I was just depressed and confused, and I just didn't want to hang around and be like the guy that used to play college ball.
Right.
Like the Al Bundy version of like, what was that show? Married with Children. Remember that? Like, that's all he talked about was his high school football career. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I need to have another chapter, and it needs to be far away and something just totally fucking random. So
you taught English? That's what you did?
So I went to China. So first I went in 2001. So I went right after 9/11. So September 2001, I was planning my journey. I bought a ticket. I think I flew out on like September the 18th or 19th.
Wow.
Right after the towers fell. Of course, the whole family is like, traveling is super dangerous. You shouldn't be going anywhere, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'll be fine. And I was so poor. My flight went Toronto, New York, Anchorage, Alaska, Taipei, Hong Kong. And that was like,
No way.
yeah. And yeah, it was like a couple $100 round trip, to Asia. And it was my first time, and I got into Hong Kong, loved it. And then I crossed the border and did a 90-day trip all around China. And I just fell in love with it. And I was just like, and then I went home for like a week or two. It just told everyone I was going to move to China. And then I just flew back and started my life there, which did, for the first like 6 months was English teaching focused. And then I started writing and doing photography. And then after about a year or two, I was making money just writing and doing photography. And then I got in with the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune. And then I started that whole arc of my career. And then Lehman Brothers killed print media. And they didn't have their digital subscription models. So it destroyed the salaries that were available at the time, like freelance salaries, day rates. And then, so I moved out of that and I was like, well, I still really want to travel and have these experiences. And I really liked traveling around China, working in journalism, meeting the people, telling these stories. And I just felt like if I can do that, making video, making television, and everything was moving away from still photography at that stage. And actually, it's too bad that entire career, that entire like era of incredible photographers that I grew up with as my peers, almost none of them are taking pictures anymore. A lot of them ended up teaching, going into academia and stuff like that. So, because after that, it just became so hard to make a living.
Yeah, I mean, isn't everybody with a cell phone a photographer now?
Well, that's it, right? And I always make a joke, like, I published 2 photography books, I won a bunch of awards, and I did my entire photography career before Instagram even existed.
That's so great. Good for you, because you couldn't have done otherwise.
No, I mean, it's strange now, but there's a lot of great photography on Instagram, and there's a lot of like great ways of promoting your work and stuff like that. But it was nice to have a career before everything kind of went digital and went crazy.
So we leave Korea after a year and we go into Vietnam. We land in Hanoi and we've done our contract. And teaching in Korea was great because I learned how rigorous, the standards are for education there. I mean, these are kids who are all in like summer school, having to learn 50 vocab words a day.
And it's intense. Like South Korea has like major problems.
Hagwon culture is not to be underestimated. It is rough.
What do they call them? Like helicopter parents, like the parents that just sit on top of their children, like forcing them to do homework and prepare for all these standardized tests. And yeah, they absolutely destroy on these standardized tests because of the training and stuff like that they do.
Also, I'd never seen a drinking culture quite like that, and I thought I was
for that.
Yeah, I was pretty well versed in such things. And I remember one day Ashley and I went down to this gym that was in like a basement. We were looking for a place to train. We got off the elevator and a guy sets down the bar. He'd just done like a set of curls or squats or something, and he lights up a cigarette. And I was like, wow. And there are ashtrays around. This is 2006, so they stopped smoking in New York City in 2003 while I was there. But in Korea in 2006, boy, you could smoke in the elevator.
Same in China too, yeah.
Yeah, and is it still that way in China, or is it changed?
It's changed a lot, yeah. So you can't do smoke indoors anymore, but people still smoke in the stairwells, and that's not very well policed.
They're good at smoking in China, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then when we came back, it was like, all right, well, now what the fuck do we do? Because initially we were going to go, we had an offer to do Dubai, or Mexico City or Istanbul.
Also with Princeton Review.
Those were the 3 places, the Princeton Review, because it's like, okay, well, maybe we'll just, for the next few years, bounce around to different Princeton Review locales and just soak up the culture and travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sounds idyllic. Like,
yeah,
good salary. Like, you get to...
South Korea had the best, Seoul had the best pay. And so everything else was just like, it's like twice as much work for half the pay. Of course, you'd be in Mexico City, but at that point, we didn't know. Mexico City then wasn't what it is today. It's really coming up. Maybe it was. I don't know. But then we decided to go back to Austin. Mm-hmm. And then so that was like Austin part 2 from basically 2007 all the way to 2012. And that's when I got really interested in personal training.
Mhm.
And
Because when I met you in 2013, you were I mean, you're in great shape now, but you were ripped.
I was
Nice.
bigger.
Yeah.
I'm still ripped. How dare you? I'm just not as big.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Underneath this shirt is pulling muscles. You know, I wanted to know what it was like to compete in bodybuilding, in powerlifting, and something I'd always been, you know, even from my earliest days of being fascinated with comics and drawing. It's very anatomical in terms of the way that you learn to, you know, put together panels and tell a story. And the comic book body, if you look at the change from like the 60s and 70s into the 80s and 90s when steroids became a part of popular culture and film and TV, that's when the physiques changed.
Yeah.
Now when
Schwarzenegger and Sly Stallone. Yeah.
now when you see the physique on a comic book character in all the Marvel universe, it's like a bodybuilder's physique, and typically an enhanced physique. And eventually I'll take anabolic steroids and put on that cape and understand what that's like. And I've always been intrigued by it, but I didn't at the time. So I did a natural bodybuilding show, which I don't know if you've ever seen competitors, but you basically look like a triathlete by the time you're all dieted down, because your body cannot maintain a lot of lean tissue when your body fat gets super low. So as a result, when you see natural bodybuilding photos, people look pretty skinny. You look pretty fucking skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think my stage weight might have been, you know, after weighing in like 176 at 6'1".
Yeah. But just zero body fat.
Yeah, very, very low. I don't know about zero, but very low. And then like 3 days later, with all that fluid back in and carved up, I'm like 190,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But somebody at 6'1" to look good on an enhanced bodybuilding stage needs to be around 220 plus, you know.
And that's not natural.
Usually not. I'm not saying anything, but usually not.
Yeah.
So I had I started out at a big box gym, Gold's Gym. And then from there, I went to a private personal training studio with one client, and she just was the prototype, Brian. So she had 5 kids. She was 40 years old, super overweight, very sad. And 3 months later, you know, she's a brand new person. She enters a physique contest, figure competition, we called it back in the day. And she won. And after that, like, sent me clients. And I was only ever doing it part-time because I still wanted to have, you know, the rock and roll dream.
Mm-hmm.
So during the day, I'm training clients and motivating them to be the very best they can be. And at night, I'm absolutely destroying my body with whiskey and Marlboro Reds and playing music for, you know, 5 hours a night.
And how long did that last before you had like a breakdown? That
Never.
sounds intense.
I never broke down.
Amazing.
Yeah, I loved it. It was great because if you know that you're going to have to push through, that I never took sick days, none of that. I would never take days off. I just liked it. I loved the grind. I loved to train really hard and then get wasted at night and play music with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted until that band blew apart.
And that was Austin.
Yeah, that was Austin. And when that band blew apart, I was like, okay, this band stuff, it's like just having a bunch of unruly partners in a relationship.
It's so hard to keep it together.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
Especially when there's a lot of creative talent in the group. Like if there's the one person who's the leader, the ideas person, that's one thing. But when everybody's good at that, you really have to have the right dynamic to keep that together.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some just personal stuff that went sideways, and I felt really sad and betrayed by all my friends around me. And I was like, I gotta change tracks completely.
And that's when you moved to LA.
No, that's when I'll go back to acting and save money to move to LA. And I was very successful really quickly with the acting stuff. So I kept my personal training business. And in the evenings, you know, I started doing theater. I would book the odd, you know, TV pilot that was shooting in Austin, commercials, etc. Because the pool is really small in Austin at that time.
You're a big fish in a small pond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was feeling very confident about that, and then came to LA in 2012.
So riding the wave of success in Austin, you're like, I'm going to La La Land
I'm going
to make it big.
Mm-hmm. And right when I got here, I was taken in by a very good friend of mine who was so kind to allow me to stay at her house while I was, finding my bearings. And maybe only a couple weeks in, I booked this Chrysler commercial. Now, this was right during the time when they remade Total Recall with Colin Farrell.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And I don't know that if I had the best audition, but I looked more like Colin Farrell than anyone at the time. And so I booked that job. Oh. And we go to Northern California. It's like a 3-day shoot. It's like everyone's patting me on the back. Bro, you just made like 30 grand. Like, congratulations. And I was like, this shit isn't so hard. Like, why does everybody...
That 30 grand has to last 24 months?
No, but why does everybody make it out like it's so difficult? Like, I booked this shit immediately.
Yeah.
And then we shoot this elaborate commercial in, the Central Coast, or where they filmed The Birds. It's not the Central Coast. It's that Hitchcock movie, The Birds.
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with it. I just don't know where they shot it.
Why does the name elude me? But we're in this beautiful pastoral setting. There are horses. There are a lot of components. It's very rural. And evidently, once the entire thing was packaged up and finished, studio said, "Oh, this is beautiful. But Total Recall is in an urban setting, so how does this relate to the packaging and the product placement within the film for Chrysler?"
Mm-hmm.
So the commercial never airs.
I didn't know that Chrysler had a product placement in the movie.
Believe they do.
Oh. Great movie, though. I loved it.
The remake?
Yeah, I like. Well, the original was the original was amazing.
Did you see the remake?
I did see the remake,
and it was great.
I mean, it was entertaining. I mean, it wasn't as transformational as the first one. It's like Blade Runner. Like, the first one was legendary, and the second one was entertaining enough. I didn't mind it.
Well, I'm petty enough that if the commercial would have aired, I might have seen the movie, but it didn't.
I refused to see the movie.
That's right. So yeah, and that was it. And then work just dried up.
So that never, you got paid, but it never aired.
I got paid a day rate. It never airs. And so now I don't have any prospects. That was with a commercial agency. 2 years later, I booked the lead role in an independent film. And there were a lot of close calls, over the years. A lot of callbacks and, screen tests. And I just haven't yet broken through.
Yeah. Can you dish on what you might have auditioned for along the way, or is that hush hush? I'm curious, like, what kind of stuff you might have been up for.
Nothing huge, but a lot of co-stars and guest stars on shows from HBO to CBS. Like, lots of stuff.
And what was that like? What was that? Okay, so you had your male modeling experience in New York, where you're living probably in a model apartment with other guys.
Listen, did you see Zoolander?
I did see Zoolander. Yeah.
So for anybody who gives a shit and remembers that movie, so much of male modeling in 2003 was exactly like that movie. Exactly.
Zoolander nailed it.
I remember going home with this girl one night, and she lived in a model's apartment. And up until that point, I had never seen a model. I was like, do you guys live in fucking bunk beds here? Like in Zoolander?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's my vision of it.
No, man. Like, a lot of it wasn't like Zoolander, but a lot of it was. A lot of it was really spot on. Some of the casting, some of the characters. But no, I didn't live in a model's apartment. I lived with a buddy of mine who's actually a chef. Mm-hmm. And now he's a chef in Austin after being all over the world. Shout out Matthew Reinhardt.
Got to get him on. But the direction I was going with that was, you're going out to castings every day in New York. You're spending money to live. You're not booking jobs, or you're booking jobs that you weren't happy with or whatever. You come to LA, and then what? You're going out to auditions every day, and maybe you're booking, maybe you're not. It almost seems like the same process. Like, was it
very similar? The only thing is, with modeling, there's not a whole lot of skill involved. Right? I mean, there is to a certain degree, and all the best models would be like,
give me your blue steel.
I don't know. I have a Le Tigre. But it's with acting, it's great because you get to use your chops, and you get to do your thing, and your natural whatever it is can come through when you're reading the lines, and you put your own interpretation on them. It's not the same for a casting where it's like, funnel, profile, 3/4
toilet.
Yeah. I mean, that for that casting, I actually had to carouse with, her name's Amber Wall. She's fantastic, really, really game to do that. In the casting, we rolled around on the ground, like we were wrestling. And the photographer's like, this is excellent. This is great.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I didn't book that one. But I did. But yeah, then coming to LA, it was just like, and I was doing all the stuff. Like I was taking the acting classes and all the best, and kind of just doing the grind. And I think the hard part in this town for anybody that's curious is like, you come here and you're a type and you get called in for a casting and there might be 15 dudes that pretty much look like you. Everyone's handsome. Everyone's in shape. Everyone's really good. Everyone's studying very hard. It honestly feels like the lottery when you, A, get a casting, get an audition, and B, book something, because the competition level is just so very high. Different from other smaller markets.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now I understand why Johnny Drama had such insecurities.
Johnny Drama?
From Entourage.
Oh yeah, so I didn't see all the Entourage episodes.
So that was
it was a great show.
Yeah,
great show.
His insecurity around castings and having to read for parts and having everyone in the room look exactly like him in the hallway before they would go in.
Oh, so that's real. So
yeah. I mean, he would have complete anxiety attacks. Like he would walk in and everyone would look like him and he'd just leave.
Like, nope, not today.
Not today. But no, I've never had that experience. So I was just like, I can't imagine going in to read for part and sitting around 10 other guys that look exactly like me.
It's troubling, and you're like, the most troubling part, and this is funny because I was just talking to an actor today about how we desperately need to bring back in-person auditions because now everything's taped. And I haven't booked anything off of a tape yet. And I've made some elaborate tapes and had some really great coaching. I put together some of what I think is my best work on a tape. And it just doesn't compare to being able to be in front of somebody and them saying, that was really good. Now, can you adjust and do this thing? Because then you can go, okay, well, this is an instrument that is dynamic. Let me do this other thing. And that's often a way for a director to go, okay, you can do that thing, which I wouldn't have seen if you just sent in a tape, which is this very one-dimensional take of how you think I want to see this role.
Yeah. And you think about the relationship between a director and an actor, and there are going to be multiple takes, and you are going to change things, and the light is going to change, and the other actors are going to change, and you have to be able to sculpt the performance in some way, like at least give notes, right? But when you're doing an audition and it's remote, that must be just soul destroying.
Yeah, but what I was alluding to earlier is like it's also pretty weird when you can hear what's going on in the next room. Like, oh man, he did it just the way I was going to do that. He put the emphasis on that syllable. Like, oh fuck, like that was my read. Mm-hmm. But so let's just fast forward. By 2016, I kind of hit rock bottom.
3 years after you met me, that's about right.
Yeah.
I usually have that arc in people's lives.
Yeah, I got 3 good years, and then I was like, man, Ryan, he really fucking brought me down.
I let you go.
And I didn't really know what to do. I didn't want to go back to training. Painting felt like a machine. Like they wanted me to crank out sausages, at least with that gallerist.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't booking the roles, and I didn't understand why. And my confidence was starting to fade, which means you're giving off subtle things when you're auditioning, and you're not shining the way that you know that you can.
Yeah.
And so
people pick up on that shit, right?
Oh yeah, man. And I don't know if we have time to talk about. I hope we do, but like I recently got hypnotized, and it was a lot of stuff based around that. But so 2016, I remember sitting on the beach with my wife and being like, I don't know what to do, and I don't have any options. And so we approached it very pragmatically. It was like, okay, well, what is going to get you paid the fastest to where you can start to dig yourself out of this hole and get back to building confidence, having a career path? And it was like, well, I want it to be remote so that I can continue to do auditions, or I just want to have the freedom so eventually I'll be remote. What did that look like in 2016? Well,
now it's everything.
Now it's everything.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was in programming, software development.
Yeah.
So I did.
You took a course on how to program because
Yes.
you'd never done that before?
Correct.
Yeah, that's wild.
So I didn't know anything about computer science. And I took a boot camp from General Assembly. They used to have a Santa Monica location. I don't know if they still do, because boot camps for coding was a really big deal in like 15 to 19.
Mm-hmm.
I did their full stack web development program.
That's hugely ambitious. That's insane. Like, I don't think I could make it through.
But Ryan, look, remember, I'm mostly, maybe not mostly, but at least half of a meathead, like in the most respectful way. But I love very simplistic, simple pleasures. I'm a simple man.
Yeah. But musician, model, actor, and then you're going to be like, nah, I'm going to code software, bitch.
I also have an academic Jones that I need to fulfill. And
Interesting.
so I see this opportunity to train basically 12 hours a day as a software developer. And you can tell in those coding sessions, like you could see around you, like who's really, really good at that and who is like me.
So there's a hierarchy to it for sure, yeah?
I mean, the best guy in that program, his name's Gus. I won't say his last name, but he was a phenom. Like he was clearly the brightest person in the group, and the youngest. I mean, I think he was like 22, maybe 23, very young.
Which is 10 years too late now if you want to get into it.
Exactly. And I've also actually heard recently that we won't even need software developers eventually because AI will run the majority of that shit. And so you have like a couple of computer science overlords that understand how to work that machinery, but like packs of people going in to study web development, no way.
Yeah.
So
one of my best buddies does software development for EA Sports. They make those sports games like FIFA and like hockey and basketball and stuff. And yeah, he loves it. Like it's been his whole life. And we were at school together, and he was learning how to do that. So
like object-oriented programming and all that hard shit.
Yeah.
So
it's wild.
I get this. I get through this, and I was like, how can I apply this to a health and fitness trajectory some way? And so I remember I applied it like Herbalife for like an emails programmer, like some really like entry-level shit, because it's like, here's 12 weeks. Now go be a full stack developer, which is 4 years for a computer science major, right? I mean, you're
pretty limited then after that. Like you just got a taste, but was it enough to get a job? Like was a 12-week boot camp enough to actually get a job?
It certainly was for me. Not easily at first. And I was starting to lose hope. And then I got a call. I mean, this is on my resume. I guess I could talk about this. I got a call from Lightstorm Entertainment, and they were like, "Hey, do you want a job?" So I came in and interviewed, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to be building software for the Avatar sequels." It's like, Avatar sequels? And I should mention, like before I did, I was done with the entertainment industry, right? I was like, fuck this.
Was it bitter? Was it like an angry, like, fuck these guys, I'm out of here?
Yeah, because I'd been in LA for 4 years at that point, and had some really great close calls, but just hadn't been able to punch my way through. And so it was like, I'm broke, I'm deeply in debt. Like I put all my passion and money and energy, believing in myself and the process, into this artistic life. And now I've got nothing and no prospects. So I learned to code in JavaScript, and shit's hard. It was hard for me, 12-hour days for real, every day for 12 weeks, because anybody else that could do it with just like 4 to 6 was just naturally good at it. So I had to work. I was like, well, I got to work twice as hard, because this is not my jam.
No.
And everybody around me was like, Thomas, why are you doing software?
Oh my God, that's got to be
like,
tough.
And I was like, it's so practical. It's like the most practical thing I've ever done. You guys should be like patting me on the back. So I get this job at Avatar, and that lasted for about a year. And it was really cool. But every day when I would go down to, craft services and see Sigourney Weaver or whoever was in the Avatar movies.
What's the name of the main actor in that one?
I thought there's a few of them.
Yeah, but the main guy who was the military soldier who then became the Avatar guy. What's that actor's name? He was a no one before before James Cameron cast him, and then he's had a huge career since then, obviously.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm blanking too. But I remember Sigourney Weaver is the lead scientist, right?
So everyone knows, I guess I could sort of modify this for anything that hasn't come out yet, but like everyone knows that they use motion capture suits to do all the filming. And so I would see people on the soundstage in their mocap suits and like, man, that's what I want to do. Like, I don't want to be up in the dark room staring at a screen, you know? And then Ashley calls and she goes, I was like, okay, let me take this call. We began trying to get her pregnant. And I was patently against that, especially when I knew you. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to have kids. I don't want kids. I came around after I kind of dug myself out of debt and got my confidence back. And I was like, man, I guess I have a pretty good brain. Like, I can teach myself JavaScript, and now I'm a software developer. And
you can pass those genes along,
I guess.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, here, I'm sending you the ultrasound right now. Did you get it? And I look at it and I was like, this looks like a shrimp right here. And what is that? Looks like a slug. Like, maybe that's like the legs. I was like, it looks like a shrimp and a slug. She's like, yeah, that's both of them. I was like, no. But we agreed that we were just going to have one. It's like, okay, well, there's two. And
do you remember Austin Powers? Twins, Basil, twins.
No, but good reference.
Thank you for that. It was the Japanese twins, fuck me and fuck you.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my go-to for anyone that has 2 children. Sorry.
I remember I was standing right in front of James Cameron's Tesla, and I get this call, and I was like, fuck, okay, well, now we're going to do this thing.
Yeah. Hey, James, I need a raise.
But at least I have a steady job.
Yeah.
And then a couple of months later, that sort of evaporated. And
what was coding like for a movie animation? Like, what did you actually have to do? Like, because I know that they were using motion capture suits, and I've seen the movies, but when you're working there, like, what was your actual job?
Great question. Way less sexy. They
didn't let you go toe to toe with Sigourney Weaver, you know, on a few monologues.
No, man. It was like we were basically optimizing the system that allowed for their database of files to be sent to Weta in New Zealand for, you know, like all the composite work. So when they're overlaying the artwork and everything else on the raw files that are coming off of the soundstage, we were making that system more optimal. And then on the front end, we were doing stuff that was just like inner office to make things more efficient. And it wasn't as sexy as it sounds when you say, you know, software development on the Avatar sequels. For me personally, but then again, I wasn't very high level. They took a chance on me, and they were so kind to do it. But like, I am not making groundbreaking software, you know?
Were you like in over your head, or could you do the job like, you know, well enough?
I mean, if I'm completely honest, I could have been a lot better, for sure. And I think that's why they kept me around as long as they did. It's just like, yeah, I mean, maybe, but remember, like, I got in as an older tech person. You know, I learned that shit from scratch 3 months earlier. It's not like I learned fast, but in order to be like a super high performing person in that world, and if you see the people that are really good at it, it's just night and day.
Yeah.
Like, they just get it, and they see, like Gus was able to, I think, see entire structures the way that a really good developer should be able to, almost like an artist. Whereas I'm trying to work on something to keep from breaking in this line of code that is really frustrating, and I have to go back. And they call it technical sophistication, because you can't be turning to the senior programmer every time you have a problem. You got to look on Stack Exchange and see who else has had this problem when you're trying to work with React or work with Angular or the different frameworks. I mean, if you love that shit, great, you're going to do really well. If you despise every minute of it and you feel like you're betraying your inner core as an artist, you'd have a hard time.
12 months max.
It's a long It's a long road.
Yeah.
So I finished that, but because I did develop a great deal of technical prowess, and at least could speak to the other developers at a very high level, I began working as a digital producer for a buddy of mine who had an advertising agency in Venice, which is great. It's like, I got these new babies. I can walk to the office. It's right across from Gold's Gym.
Fantastic.
Like, everything's perfect. It's lining up again. I'm like, okay, well, this is even better. We had some high profile projects, and that was great. But again, same thing. I was like, I love drinking really nice cappuccinos in the middle of the day, and having all these meetings isn't the worst thing in the world, but man, I really wish I was making art. And I am completely just turning my back on the thing that really lights me up. And I didn't have to make that choice. It was made for me right around COVID, the beginning of COVID. That company downsized. And I was already getting my real estate license because I wanted to get into real estate investment. I got my license in January I took the test in January. I joined Sotheby's in March of 2020.
How about perfect timing?
Yeah. So I started a real estate career during the beginning of the pandemic. And I had a really good time with it. I learned so much. And just some wild breakthroughs. Like the very first cold call I ever did on a for sale by owner, by the end of the call, I had that listing. And I was like, I've heard like this is the hardest thing to do in sales, is to cold call somebody and then get the listing, especially for sale by owners, like whole Reddit forums dedicated to this shit. And I was like, wild. I did it the first time. And you know what? It worked so well, I never did it again.
Oh, really?
I didn't even think to. I was like, well, shit, this is easy.
Yeah.
So many times in my life, I have this really early success and I take my foot off the gas because I figure like, well, this is the way it is. This is normal. I closed on a house in December for my parents in Pasadena. And so I've been able to use that real estate stuff. But again, same thing. Like through the course of the real estate, I was like, man, I don't know. I don't really love this, and I miss the creative muse. And so I'm finally catching up to like what I've done the last 2 years. I got a master's degree in creative writing at a low residency program focused on screenwriting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a valuable thing. Like if you can write the part that you want to play, I think you're way ahead as an actor.
Sure, but then you got to find the money and the time.
But of course, there's a lot of other things, but at least you don't have to audition and try to play someone else's words, right? Like if you've got, it can work if you know what your strengths are, maybe.
So I was getting up in the 4:00 hour because, now I've got these two kids and they wake up last couple of years until this year at 7. So from 4 to 7 is basically my time to write for my master's degree. And so
your alone time.
2 years. 2 years I did that. Meanwhile, doing real estate during the day and then joining my wife's acupuncture business called Elemental Wellness, elementalwellnessacupuncture.com.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are working to build the corporate wellness program. And so the idea there is to go in with a comprehensive suite of wellness services, from acupuncture to personal training, because of my 20 years in that world, massage, IV therapy, sound baths, etc., that is catering to each company based on what their employees need, etc.
Mm-hmm. Employee wellness is a big business these days because companies have basically realized like by abusing your employees, you don't get the best out of them.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because for a while, what I'd heard from people that were, C-level executives was we've offered the world to these guys and we can't get them back in the office. From Michelin-starred chefs making lunches during the day to on-site massage. Well, now that the world seems to be shifting back the other way, I think there's a lot more traction. And what you're saying is true. The corporate wellness as a whole worldwide continues to grow, exponentially every year. And so I think people are trying to figure out, like, how do we keep people sane and healthy, but also get more out of them in terms of productivity? And can we do that actually on site? And so that's where we come in. Like, I think a lot of wellness programs focus on like an app-based wellness.
Or some retreats, right? But that's maybe not often enough. Maybe that's like once a quarter, once a year.
It's more like a reward rather than like a habit, like a daily. And I want to be able to affect change broadly with this, in a way that is actionable, but also sustainable,
Absolutely. So what was the master's degree like in writing?
So screenwriting, and it was phenomenal. Now, a lot of people will say you don't need to get a master's in screenwriting; you just got to write more scripts. And sure, but mine was strategic. I wanted the mentors to have then connections to the industry, so that I would finish this master's degree with maybe a couple of accolades, which I was able to achieve: a finalist, in a fellowship, a semifinalist at Austin Film Fest last year. For some scripts that I wrote purely as exercises. And it's like, it leveled up my writing quite a bit. But I wouldn't say that as of now. I just graduated, well, technically in January. I'm like, I don't have an Oscar yet, so it didn't work.
Yeah.
I should start something new.
Oscars are in 8 days.
Yeah.
7 days.
It's funny though, but you could see the pattern. It's like, boy, you achieve this high level, you're placing in international competitions, and it doesn't happen fast enough. So it's like, well, what else can I get really good at?
Mm-hmm.
I really like working hard at a thing until I get to a pretty high level. And then if I don't, taste that thing, it's like, well, what else can I work on?
It's interesting for me actually, because it seems like through your whole career and your many different careers along the way, you love the grind.
I love it.
You love it. But then once you reach like a high level, like you book a Chrysler ad or whatever, or you get, a campaign, yeah, it's almost like the grind is over, but it's not. Like that's
when it's just beginning.
Yeah.
And you would think I'd have learned by now that, okay, you got a semifinalist placing in the Austin Film Festival screenwriting competition in 2023. Congratulations. Your work as a screenwriter has just begun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And instead I'm like, oh, I don't have a manager yet or an agent.
Topped out.
Nobody's bought my shit. Like, what else can I do? But it's not like that. And that's the thing, is like, so that keeps going. The writing keeps happening. The real estate, probably less, just because I don't particularly love that special grind, especially on the buyer side. Like, that is hard. In LA, it is very hard. Having listings is different. That's pretty easy. But having to deal with buyers, especially your parents, oof.
Parents are tough. I don't know. I watched like one episode of Selling Sunset on Netflix, which is the Oppenheimer Group, which is up on Sunset Boulevard. They have an office there. Like, that's all I know about LA real estate.
Yeah, there's more to it than that, but
I don't know. I just want to share my little window into that world.
Well, what's so interesting is everything in LA is $1 million. So
minimum. Like you can't buy a home for less than like
so like a teardown is $1 million, and so basically the return on all that work is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, this town is in many ways like with actors. There's a shit ton of realtors, a shit ton of personal trainers. Like, is saturated in many of those markets where traditionally it can be really lucrative if you're the biggest fish, and it is, man. Those heavy hitters in this town are making tens of millions of dollars a year. But for me, for somebody that doesn't love it, and I have all these other things I want to accomplish, it's like, what am I trying to be the best real estate agent? Like, I have art I need to make, man. Like,
but you always come back to your art.
Always. Yeah. And so then probably the best question is, well, why do you keep leaving it?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Yeah, it's like, because everything you've done, you've kind of, I wouldn't say abandoned, but you've changed gears to go back to what makes you really happy, which is writing and acting and making music, like and painting. Like, it just seems like, yeah, that's your core. I mean, I feel the same way when I make my TV show. Like, it pushes all the buttons that I need to feel alive.
When you feel like you can work 18, 20 hours a day, it's like not even a second thought. It's
365 days a year.
Yeah.
No problem. I'm not going to be tired. I'm not going to complain.
I love
exactly what I want to be doing.
Same. And so that's what I kind of want everybody to shoot for. And I know it's like, well, you're not even fucking doing that yourself. It's like, well, I kind of am. And especially as I age, that is definitely going to be the crux of like what I trying to impress upon people is like, you got to make the thing that is your idea. And I think that if it's diluted by too many people, it stops being your idea. It stops being as compelling. It stops being as satisfying.
Yeah.
So always have a passion project, even on going on the side, or underneath or hidden in the shadows, but you got to have that thing. Otherwise you will be a soulless, cranky shell of a human being pissed off at the person in front of you in traffic.
Every day.
Yeah.
For life.
I mean, and now, well, so yes, I have abandoned them, but only because of a practical need, you know, to, well, so you're saying I abandoned them to go back to the art, and that's true, but like, I keep leaving the art path because I have a practical need to like take care of the family.
Sure.
And so the ultimate will be where I'm able to do both at the same time. And so because my art hasn't paid off yet in that very financially important way, I think that's why I keep veering off into these other paths, but I'm really coming to the end of that. I've done it enough times now, Ryan. It only took me like 11 or 12 times to learn. Like I maybe need to just follow my heart.
But that's really interesting because I've talked to a few people in the entertainment industry since I've been here and also on the podcast. And the hardest thing is paying rent and making ends meet in between the jobs. And the jobs don't come once a month or once every 2 weeks when you need them. They come once every 6 months or once every 8 months. And they might be lucrative, but then you've got nothing. And one actor that I had spoken to, he'd come here from Colorado. That's when he got into social media. And he's much younger than us, and he's big on TikTok and has like 1 million YouTube followers and all this stuff. But he said he got so bored in between making movies, and he actually was in some movies as an actor, and he loved it. But he got so bored in between and doing all the auditions that he started making YouTube videos with his friends as a way to exercise that creative muscle. And he ended up actually now having a quite large social media following. He makes great money just making social media videos. And he says like he makes more money doing social media stuff than most actors make, you know, who are members of SAG.
100%.
Yeah. But it's funny that it came out of that need the same way you have transitioned into different careers. Like it came out of that same need of just needing to make ends meet in between gigs, basically.
Well, also, as an actor, you give up an enormous amount of your own power when you're waiting for someone to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the younger actors that I talk to, I'm like, man, make your shit. Like, just make your stuff, and you'll get better at it the more you make it. And if somebody decides to pluck you from obscurity and put you in something big and you start to make money, that's great. But in the meantime, like, you will wait for somebody to say yes, and you will be up against 15 or 20 other people
who look exactly like you,
just like you, and who are just as qualified and probably very good, you know, especially at a certain level. So the best thing anyone can do is just make their own stuff.
Yeah, no, it's crucial. And now obviously with social media and phones being as good as they are, like the technology is there to do anything at any time.
Right.
Yeah.
Does your audience know that you are controlling and manipulating the cameras at all times?
I don't think they do, no.
Because it's enormously impressive. Like learning to write a function in JavaScript is one thing, but Ryan has been this entire time, no matter what the emotion was like, switching back and forth the cameras with his fingers while telling stories, while keeping me riveted. I just don't know how you do it. How long did it take you to get good at that shit?
From the first time out.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're just good at stuff.
Well, one thing is I can see the screen out of the corner of my eye, and also you've got the on-air sign on your side. So I know,
helps.
So I know which screen to look at when I'm live cutting. So it just helps, and you know, it works.
Wow, very, very impressive.
Thanks, buddy. It's just and again too, like I can then prepare a question knowing that I'm going to come back to me for a question, and come over to you, and then. Yeah, actually, I
don't know if anyone else is doing that, because that is, you need a shot, an overhead shot of you just going.
Just one button.
Well, let's get one more camera on here so they can see. We got the finger cam.
Yeah. I don't want to give away all my secrets.
Fair enough.
But you know.
Edit that out.
No, I love it in, but I wanted to have a podcast platform where I could do everything by myself. Like, I don't want to have a producer. I don't want to have someone who's going to call me the night before and be like, I can't come in tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. Like, and then I have to call you and tell you I can't do the thing tomorrow because
I don't have the guy.
And I was just like, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be for me only. It's going to be friends and people I'm interested in. And I got to be able to do the whole thing from start to finish. And I need to figure it out how to do it. And because I cannot cancel on guests that want to come and see me. I'm already taking time out of their day. They're amazing to come to my, to the house and to the home studio and everything like that. Like, I cannot be canceling on these people because of someone else.
Sure.
So I need to figure it out on my own and make it happen. And then it's just content. Like, I can just make it. You can have these great conversations. It can go out, and there's nothing stopping me.
I think that you should do a tutorial with your setup and how. I mean, this is really great.
I learned how to do this from someone who made a tutorial on their setup.
So is it on YouTube already?
Yeah, YouTube is full of guys that are like, this is how I made my podcast studio, and this is, and I literally watched a couple of those, found one guy that I really liked, and bought all the same shit and just set this whole thing up.
Wow,
yeah.
YouTube's so good for that. See, YouTube is really, that's where everyone should be.
It's happening. YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world now.
Is that true? Oh, speaking of YouTube. I have, I think I had a YouTube channel 10 years ago that I was never serious about. And now I am getting serious about it.
We're in the same boat on that front.
Mm-hmm. And so it's just Thomas Huisking. It's me. But I want to focus on dads. And the first thing I've done is put up this entire program called the Metamorphosis Program that I built in 2016. It's a 28-day program for changing the way you think, eat, and move. And it's all based around 30-minute workouts, farm-to-table nutrition, a meditation practice, short, like 5 minutes, in cold water therapy. So cold showers.
I love cold water therapy.
So what I found is the people that have been able to do this for 28 days have had like exceptional results. Most people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is, it's hard enough to change one behavioral pattern, but to do 4 simultaneously, to take cold showers, to start eating really good food, to do a meditation, and to do 30-minute training every single day.
Yeah, that's a lot for me.
That's a lot for anybody.
Yeah.
But the people that do are like brand new people. So specifically for dads who I feel like, don't get enough credit and don't really know how to navigate it. I've had this thought for a while. I didn't want to exploit my kids in any way by putting them on a channel without their consent. And now
just blur out their faces.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I remember when my wife was pregnant, my kid, my colleagues are like, you gonna fucking throw them up on Instagram and stuff? I was like, no, never. I would never do that. And now I'm like,
they have their own Instagram pages.
Yeah. So now I want to help other dads. And so my, YouTube channel will be around helping people that are really struggling, emotionally and physically in this very stressful time of being a father. You might be a new father or an older father, but like kids, that's like the most challenging shit there is.
It's so expensive.
Right.
No, but in an era of high inflation coming out of COVID, free money was everywhere, and now it's not. Groceries are more expensive. Rents keep going up. We live in LA. Like, it's just incredibly expensive every day to exist. And then you're trying to bring in people into this world, like the financial stress, the time management stress. Like, I like thinking of you, like waking up at 4 a.m. just so you can fucking write your script without people screaming at you all day. Like, that to me is a lot.
So imagine all those other dads that maybe aren't quite as motivated as I am to grind like that. And if they just knew, if they just had the information in a convenient place, maybe it would help them. I don't know. So my channel is going to be dedicated to like helping dads become badass again. And so anybody who's listening can go check out that YouTube channel. And also just my name, thomashuisking.com. That will send you directly to the Metamorphosis Program, which is fucking free.
Great.
It's free. It's like 50 videos. It took me a few months to make and record.
That's like, no small task.
Dude, I was doing cooking videos. I'm training. I'm into all these weird tutorials. Like, it was a lot of my life in 2016 before I hit rock bottom.
This was the path to rock bottom.
Well, yeah. Well, this was part of it because I was like, okay, well then I will parlay this into, a training business. And I was like, I don't want to be a trainer. I want to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 things that light me up: creative work and the meathead stuff. So really I should have probably just kept going with the training. But at that point I had depleted all my funds to record this program. And I didn't know shit about marketing. So it's not like I made a bunch of money when I released it. And so now it's completely free, just with the hopes that it'll help somebody,
That's great. Well, I'll definitely link to your website.
Lead magnet. So give me your email.
I will. I'll definitely link to it when we put this out, and obviously link to you on all your social media accounts and things like that. So that's not a problem. They'll find it.
Yeah.
Those people who want to find it will find it for sure.
So you're gonna build up the YouTube channel, and you're dedicated to doing that now, like actively.
Well, I think, if I can, I mean, again, like the dream would be for me to be able to grab my guys and go to Papua New Guinea for 2 weeks and do an amazing trek, and then just put the thing up on YouTube and put out like one.
Please do that.
But it just has to make money. Like it just can't, because it's just so prohibitively expensive to, like, there's a lot of people making great YouTube content out there who are hiking and trekking and climbing, and a lot of them are filming it themselves without audio and without kind of explaining to the audience what's going on and stuff like that. And a lot of it's really pretty, really well shot. They're getting millions of views, but it's not TV, right? It's not like storytelling. They're telling a story through imagery, but they're not really, it's not what we would consider to be like traditional television. But I still want to make traditional television, and I hope, I can still have the guys out there to make sure the sound quality is good, to fly the drones the right way, to find the, to find the guides and to, the porters and everything, and really go to places that are hard to get to and places that are quite extreme. And I don't want to kind of give that up. And part of me has been a little bit hesitant. Like I desperately kind of want to get back to it, but I want to get back to it at the same quality level. Like I don't want to have to diminish the quality of what I've been doing. I think that's been the mind fuck about how to kind of get back into this space.
Well, I think you talked about, parlaying it into a pretty plum speaking gig. And I think a great way to monetize would be to go shoot the thing in Papua New Guinea and spend the money, put out a brilliant product, and then use that as the lead magnet for speaking.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
speaking dates. And it's like, you'll be talking about this thing that is, viewable by anyone all over the world. That's the thing I think I was turned on to, is like LinkedIn less. Let's say Instagram and Facebook. That's still, unless you're running ads, your narrow network of people who are seeing you.
Mm-hmm.
But YouTube, people can fucking pop into that from anywhere on the planet as a recommended video.
Yeah. Which is amazing. Like the reach you can have with YouTube is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, but then you can actively use the footage that you've shot to reach out to those people that might want you for a speaking engagement, or have your agent do it or whatever. Be like, he's going to talk about this latest adventure. And so then that is the lead magnet for the next speaking engagement. I just think there are ways beyond like, oh, I need, 10 million views on a video in order to monetize. I think the bulk of your business will come from, at least until you get the next big broadcast deal. Mm-hmm. Speaking engagement's great. Like, you're so compelling. You have so much good, you have such an incredible resume and portfolio. It's like,
thank you.
It speaks for itself.
Yeah. I love the speaking engagements. Like, they're 45 minutes, an hour, you shake some hands, you meet some amazing people, you inspire them in some way. I really, really loved it. I was doing a ton of them before COVID, and they really haven't come back yet. So I was thinking about trying to take control of, I used to have to rely on agents, and it was a lot of like Fortune 500 companies, and like they would have retreats or corporate events, and I would show up and talk to them about all this, like, reinventing yourself, working in small teams, working under stressful situations, all stuff that was happening during our adventures, right? And in kind of repurposing those experiences for corporate life. But now I think I actually have a lot like that I can just offer audiences, like a night out, like, grab your wife, get a babysitter, come out and listen to me talk about, being a global traveler for a night, for an hour or an hour and a half or whatever. So I'm really kind of thinking about building that out and then using the podcast to also promote it and just having the whole ecosystem like on YouTube.
What was your title again? How Not to Die?
How Not to Die. I don't know what I should call it. Like a night of adventure.
Yeah.
Or fuck, I'm not supposed to be here.
Right. That's way snappier.
Yeah. I'm not supposed to be in rural Oklahoma at this theater. I'm supposed to be in Papua New Guinea filming, but tonight I'm here with you.
I'm going to be thinking about it a lot, because there's just so much there that you could build from, and so many different directions you could go in terms of, trying to monetize that. But,
we'll see
about that tonight.
We'll see. We'll get there. It's all building slowly. It's just great to be here at least, because at least the creative juices are back flowing, and this is a country. If you tell stories in English, whether you're doing a podcast, whether you're writing, whether you're filming, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it in English, you need to be in the United States. And that's just
Interesting.
because I've lived in China, I've done time in Switzerland. I was a resident of Switzerland for a little while. I've lived in Dubai. And Dubai is a majority English speaking country as well. But if you want to have a podcast, if you want to make TV shows, if you want to do all these things, you want to and do events, and if you speak English, you need to be in an English speaking country, and there's no bigger, better place than here. So, it was great that I spent so much time abroad building up a resume, having these great experiences that I can now share. But now I feel like it's a great time to come back because I've got so much to talk about. And this is the country where you distribute English speaking stories.
Were you able to collect a pretty large Chinese audience while you were there?
No, not at all. I mean, I really fell flat on that. My Chinese wasn't good enough. Their English wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do a lot of things that Chinese people like. I very much stuck to my own ways, and the hiking and the trekking and the climbing and the motorcycle stuff. There were pockets and niches where that was respected, but it was never mass market in any way, shape, or form. The Harley group in Beijing, saw the show and they were impressed by it. But there's 10 guys in Beijing who ride Harley, right? 10? Probably some more, or the BMW group, right?
Yeah.
But because I worked with BMW off and on, but that it was just very niche, and it never kind of captured. We did broadcast some of my shows on Chinese TV, for the mass market. And actually, I've worked with someone in China and put all my shows on Chinese streaming platforms, because my agent that I work with in London, they don't. There's no one buying in China, so we just put them up, and they're available and they're around, but they're not very popular. It's hard to be famous in China if you're a white guy. I mean, unless you're an actor or promoting, massive movie or some kind of I remember when I was living in China, Brad Pitt was huge. He was doing Chrysler ads for them back in the day. But Nick Cage was massive. He was everywhere in China because he was obviously making big movies. He won an Oscar, but he was also a Montblanc ambassador, the pen company, and the men's jewelry, they make everything. But he was always on their billboards all around town.
Wow.
Yeah. Because a lot of these actors...
What year was that, 2006?
I mean, I feel like Nick Cage was everywhere in Shanghai from 2002 to 2015, 16.
Well, what a run.
Yeah. But so many of these actors, they make so much money working with brands internationally. So what they do is they'll
they would never do that stuff in stateside.
Well, no. So this is what they would do. Like for example, someone like George Clooney, he's a Omega watch ambassador, right? But you never see him sponsored or doing advertisements and stuff like that in the United States, right? Because he already has too much exposure in the United States because he's a famous actor. So they do Omega stuff all around the world, and he makes money from that. I guess he makes money from that. I wouldn't assume he does it for free, but he does. But and again, like George Clooney, Nicole Kidman, Cindy Crawford, Omega. I'm just thinking of all the advertisements I used to see in Shanghai. But then in the United States, they don't do any of that, because then when he has a new movie to come out and they're promoting the movie, they see his face and they haven't seen it for a while, so they want to go see the movie. But if they see him on fucking Omega and they see him doing espresso cup coffee and all this other stuff, then it's almost like you're saturating the image.
I wonder if that's old psychology, though, because
it might be.
I've never seen so much Taylor Swift, someone who I was, barely on my radar.
Yeah.
Still, I'm not going to say anything because this is potentially incendiary, but now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Her image is everywhere, in every feed, every news feed, every news organization, every media organization. Shockingly.
But it feeds her business because she makes the music herself, and she doesn't really, I don't think she has any corporate partnerships.
No.
So whereas George Clooney has to raise money from Sony or Universal or Netflix or whatever, and then he needs to also have corporate partners like Omega and Nespresso and all these other things. So I think it's a little bit different, but it just seems like everything that Taylor Swift is doing is feeding back only into her music. In which case, the more PR, the better, because then just people go to Spotify or Apple or whatever and just stream, right? And then she gets paid from that. And then, of course, live events are huge.
$1 billion tour.
I just love her because I think she's great. She went on Time magazine with her cat. And to me, that's legendary.
Good for her. Well, you are a cat lover.
I'm an animal lover all around. Yeah. But I was just traveling so much for so many years, it didn't really work out. Okay, so as we're 2.5 hours. Look, hypnosis. Where are we with hypnosis?
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so. Ooh, you sure you want to go here?
I'm up for it because I've got someone coming on next week about psychedelics.
Oh, cool.
And I'm very interested in this like self-healing space, this non-pharmaceutical way of dealing with emotions and depression and all this kind of stuff. I find it very interesting. I don't think, I'm very kind of curious, and there's a lot of like there's a comedian that I follow, and he was chronically depressed like since the age of 10 on antidepressants and all this kind of stuff. And he did some psychedelics and it completely changed his life, and he's completely off pharmaceutical medication.
Which comedian is that?
Neil Brennan. So he was a co-writer with Chappelle on the Chappelle show.
I saw Neil do I don't even know what you would call it. It was like a back alley show in Santa Monica. Pre-COVID, he used to host like a weekly open mic for people to test out new material. Neil Brennan's incredible.
Yeah, and he's got a great Netflix series called 3 Mics, and then he's got another one.
So good.
Yeah, I loved that. Having the 3 personalities on the 3 mics. I loved it. But he has a Rogan. He did a Rogan.
100% of people who eat dinner in grocery stores are murderers. Something like that.
I remember that.
So good. I think about that every time I see people eating in grocery stores. I'm like, oh shit, Neil Brennan, you nailed it.
Well, it's that Whole Foods, right, on Sunset, where they have like that little bench where you can get like hot food and just sit at the bench and look out at the parked cars and people just eating there. Like, why don't you have somewhere else to go or do anything? Like, you're just sitting in the Whole Foods, where you bought the food. But yeah, I mean, people are on the go. People are busy. But I love Neil Brennan, and he did a Joe Rogan podcast a couple years ago. Like, I think now it's been 2 or 3 years, where he talked about an ayahuasca experience and how he's been going back and doing them. And it's completely taken him off antidepressant drugs because he was like chronically depressed for his entire life. Like,
he still seems pretty sad, but I'm not going to speak for him.
No. I'd love to chat him out. I'd love to have a chat with him about it.
Have you reached out to him?
I've started going to some comedians. There are some yes, some no. There were a few that I wrote to, got replies right away, but they want to do it remote. They don't want to come to the studio. They want to do it by Zoom and stuff like that. And I just won't do it. Like, the same way you love a live audition where you can react to the person in front of you and tailor your performance
take notes.
Yeah. I just love actually meeting people face to face.
That's so good. I hope you always stick to those guns, Plus you always have this sweet production value for the studio. Okay, so speaking
hypnosis.
Speaking of psychedelics, that's where the story really starts. A year after the kids were born, so this is 2019, I was in the darkest place I've ever been, because what happens with parenthood, especially, let's say, the kids were born when I was 40. You have a pretty calcified idea of yourself at 40.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that threatens that is really oppressive. And so I've always identified with my ability to change gears and do whatever the fuck I wanted. Well, once you have 2 kids, it's like you see that has completely evaporated.
The options narrow, right?
The options, well, yeah, it's precisely. Now look, I could have left, but I couldn't have. So, okay, you got to be here. You're going to be a father to these kids. And I did my best, and nobody really knew how sad I was and depressed I was to have sort of given up this identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because you think it's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be different. I'm 40 when this is happening. So I think I pretty much understand what's going to happen, right?
40 is the new 20.
Yeah. No. Just the deep realization that my life had changed forever was something that was very hard for me to get my head around. And, on the one hand, you could be like, yeah, you're a big fucking baby and you waited so long you didn't understand this is the way that it was going to go. But also, I think a creative person not typically, but in my case, pretty selfish. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And that was gone. So I felt...
That's completely gone.
Yeah. So I felt terrible. I was going around feeling like, man, I didn't even, this is not what I expected. Like, you're sleep deprived. You're no longer who you think you are. or who you identify as, which is part of what the egoic issue is that you can't deal with not being who you think you are, right? And so I was like, I'm gonna got to do ayahuasca. So I went.
So you went straight for ayahuasca.
So yeah, well, I'd heard about it in 2013 from a friend of mine, Nicholas Gregoriades, and he talked about it on our podcast, LA Real, back then. And I was like, God, I'm so intrigued. Like, I want that. And I didn't really think I had many issues at the time. And, you know, the change that I'm describing now, I can identify. But at the time, I was like, I just feel sort of despondent, like I'm not doing the art that I wanted to do. And I thought I was going to go to this ayahuasca ceremony and talk to it like a plant guidance counselor. Like, well, should I go to Rome and record that Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire album like I wanted to do? Or should I keep auditioning? No, man, it's not a guidance counselor. It's like it's the most devastating, for me, heavy-handed teacher I've ever had. And
you got to walk me through that.
She smashed me, and it's definitely a feminine energy, entity. I don't like to fully recall it, but I'll do it. I'll do my best. So,
well, you can just walk me through the before and after if you don't want to. If it's too painful, like I don't want to.
Well, I'll tell you. For me, it was quite terrifying, and it caused terror for at least a year. Every night when I would go to sleep, I'd be terrified she'd show up again because
of that one ayahuasca session.
Because the lessons were so hard. What I learned in that, and this is actually good. This is good for all fathers and parents to hear.
I don't have any tissue in here, so you're gonna be able to keep it together.
I'm not gonna cry. I
might cry listening in.
You might.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and I'll say a lot of things. Here's the thing I learned, but there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. Everything that we convey to children, said or unsaid, they can feel. Now, that sounds a little bit woo and probably a little bit irrational and impractical, but that's exactly what was shown to me in the ayahuasca ceremony. Again, I was ready to bask in this guidance counselor, artistic, tell me my creative path shit. And when she came, first of all, I'm a middle child. And everybody else seemed to be visited by her before me. I could hear like these moans and groans and this kind of fear swept through the room. And I was like, why am I not seeing any indication of what's happening? Like, and I was still sitting up at this point. And I was like, I wish she would see me. It's just like with my parents, like I'm the middle child, like I do all these things, like why I just can't be, I'm invisible somehow.
Right. You're not the oldest. You're not the youngest. You're just kind of slapped in the middle.
I'm the only boy. Right. And then she fucking showed up, Ryan. And that was like, it's making the hairs on my arms stand up right now. Mm-hmm. It's like for me, the impression was like all the flora and fauna that you can imagine in an amalgamation that completely covered my field of vision. So vines, leaves, hair, claws, eyes. And then I immediately started apologizing out loud. I was like, I'm sorry. I don't want to be seen. Like, please don't see me. Please don't see me. It was so overwhelmingly intense. And it was like the breadth of everything that has ever been from plants and animals was combined in that moment, coming on to me like a tapestry of power, right? And I was like, okay, this is overwhelming, and I don't know why I'm apologizing other than I just think I needed to back off because it's too much. Well, simultaneous to this, one of the gentlemen that was in the experience with me was absolutely losing his shit, like in a very violent way. Flew outside out of the temple we were in, had to be subdued. And in his mind, I heard later from him that he was sort of, if I'm not mistaken, transported to his childhood in a war-torn country that was just ravaged by violence. So he was in that scenario, screaming about it in a way that was like blood-curdlingly terrifying.
And these are psychedelic experiences where you're actually feeling like you're in that moment again. So that terror...
For him, it was as real as this moment is now. Yeah.
I can't even imagine that.
But the rest of us are like, remember I talked about being in the audition and the other person's in the room and you can hear how they're doing stuff? Well, this is the same thing, only like you're living through their absolute worst nightmares out loud and all you can do is hear it. And you're still dealing with your shit, which for me, I'm transported into my son's body and I have to relive every moment when I walked by him and put any sort of negative energy his way, like contemptuous, like he's crying so much, he's weak, he's this, he's that. I didn't even have to say anything out loud. Just feeling the person that has brought you into this world give you that kind of disdain and contempt is devastating for a child. I didn't know that. And I had to relive it. And then I had to go through my wife's labor again, which was 30 hours. And I remember pleading with ayahuasca, like, I was here. Like, I did this. I was there. He's like, you weren't there enough. Here it is again in all of its glory. And it was just so scary. And they say a lot of different things about ayahuasca. The medicine starts working right when you decide to use it. You don't get, like the Rolling Stones lyric, you probably aren't going to get what you want, but you'll get what you need. That's for fucking sure. And what I needed was to heal my relationship with my son, primarily, Seneca, and with my immediate family. And I didn't even think there was really a huge rift. I knew I could have done better, but like one of the notions was, imagine if these two children were the most important children ever born. I was like, well, obviously they're not. You're not saying that. She's like, no, but imagine if they were. How would you treat them? If you knew your kid was the most important kid in the world, you would probably never try to steal his shine or cut him down or make him feel less than. In your subtle, disgusting adult ways, right? And so that was a hard lesson. That was brutal. It was emotional. I couldn't throw up. I couldn't shit. I wanted her desperately out of my system. Just because it was definitely the impression of like, if you don't change these things and you come see me again, there will be hell to pay.
So like a real warning.
Oh yeah. And I was apologizing the entire time, and there was a really special moment too where, have you heard of this idea of blood sense memory or blood memory? Like all things have a memory of, years before, rocks and trees and generational trauma. That's a thing because it's passed down. You heard of this?
I've heard a little bit of it, yeah.
There's this moment where I'm looking at the embodiment of this entity and kind of reaches out and peels back a piece of the fabric of space and time right between you and I. Just peels it back, and I can see it's like full of circuitry and wires, but it's all organic, like vines and leaves and shit, with electricity charged through it. And what I understood of it at the time was like, this is an indication that the world is always keeping score. And so you will always be able to be brought back to lessons that you need to learn, even if you don't remember. And something that I struggle with for a long time with any psychedelics is, is this stuff coming from inside your brain and the medicine is, showing you different pieces of your brain, or are there external, entities and spirits and energies? And having never thought of these things or seen any of these things before, I'm sure it's pseudoscience, but Western medicine doesn't necessarily have a good way to measure all these things just yet. But my impression is that this is just a narrow band of reality that we're experiencing right now. And the rest of reality is that's where it gets heavy, and that's where all the stories come from about trolls and fairies and ghosts and entities and angels. Like, it's all out there.
And that all exists, but not in our kind of current bandwidth.
That's what I think. That was my impression based on this. I'm maybe down the road, somebody will be like, don't worry. We've done a bunch of tests, and it turns out it's just this really fucked up part of your brain that was inaccessible before that this medicine unlocks. It's a little bit too weird and out there for it to be like, oh yeah, like I cooked all this up, because it is so specific to shit that I've never seen before. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. So is it unlocking something in your brain that you haven't had access to before, or is it showing you what's really going on in the universe?
Yes. And so I lean towards the latter. It'd be interesting to see where people chime in on that. I think probably there's not a definitive answer, or people will definitively just decide, well, obviously it's your brain. There's no such thing as magic and fairies and trolls and such. But when you see it, it's like, man, this is not like an amalgam of all the movies I've seen before. And it's like, oh, it's just, your projections from all the media you've consumed, almost like AI.
Right.
Right? Like you can type in on DALL-E or whatever the various chat GPT and AI functionality is, it's scouring the internet to put together this new composite of an image.
Right.
I don't think my brain's doing that. And I've limited use with psychedelics, just mushrooms. I went straight to ayahuasca. It was unfortunately colored, my ceremony, by somebody else going through some very tragic stuff, which brought 10 times the terror that I think I would have experienced. Although I remember being on my side, shaking like this and being like, I'm so sorry, and looking over and seeing this one guy, Igor, who was in the lotus position with the most blissful look on his face. And I was like, man, Igor never did a bad thing in his fucking life. This guy, he's having the time of his life. He's like, she was really gentle with me. I was like, meanwhile, everyone else is screaming bloody murder and like running out of the, running into the desert.
It's wild that everyone has such a unique experience based on their past experiences. Like everyone has a unique experience in that moment based on the shit that's happened or hasn't happened in their lives. Like I find that to be terrifying.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But also really cool because you're going to get the lesson that you need, Here's what I learned recently, though. A buddy of mine, Peter, was doing a talk around this very thing. He's just gotten back from Peru.
Ayahuasca HQ, Peru is.
Yeah, and it wasn't just ayahuasca. He was doing a few other medicinal compounds, or master plants, as they're called, to work through some of his stuff. But he gave me an entirely new perspective on this, which is, first of all, it's not recreational, right? Like this isn't fun in any way, shape, or form. This is not party stuff. Just so for anybody who's listening and is looking for the next thrill, it's not. It's medicine. It's for deep healing, and you really have to be ready for it. There's a whole diet involved. Like I stopped all meat products, fat, alcohol, caffeine, everything for a month before I did this. And then I did a water fast for a whole week after, because I wanted the medicine to keep working. But he came back and he was like, look, if there isn't a person there in the form of the shaman or guardian or whoever it is, who is working hard to remove all that shit that you're purging energetically, you could just have it kind of hang around on your person. And that's, I think, really what happened to me. Like there was no intake. It wasn't like, Thomas, what are your problems? Like what are you here for? Like give me a full rundown like you would with any other practitioner. Mm-hmm. What ails you? And then on the way out, it should be like, now here are your next steps moving forward to try and continue to heal. That wasn't it. It was like, show up, everyone's fucking scared, and then we, do our best afterwards. And so I think part of the reason why I had such a negative experience for a full year after, every time I would go to sleep, is because all that bad shit that was dredged up stayed there. But now it's like right here, instead of like deep in my being,
did
deep in my chakras.
But did that did keeping those negative experiences close to you? Obviously, it hindered your sleep, and you were afraid to go to sleep. But did it make you want to address the issues that were brought up
100%,
and make those changes?
Yeah, but it was a very bully-like way to do it, right?
That's the only way to get through to you.
Yeah, right. It's the only.
You're not taking it lightly.
It's that I don't think it the point was made. Mm-hmm. I don't think it needed to interfere with how I thought, every single night. And again, it's strange to be afraid because you've been through it, the medicine's out of your system, but it's so real, Ryan. It's so, again, when she peeled back the fabric of space-time in front of me, that was just as real as this microphone right here.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, that's what's really strange about it. Whereas alcohol, can give you a blurry haze of things, this was like sharp.
Yeah. That's terrifying.
Mine was really hard, and a lot of people, many people will have a completely different story. Some people have lovely, blissful experiences. Mine was hard. I needed it. It saved my life, probably. I was ready to jump off a roof, for sure.
You were that far?
Oh, yeah. When I did the ayahuasca, I was like, I need this. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen.
Who was the first person you spoke to after you came out of that experience?
Well, the other people there, because you came out, you come down, I think it was like 4 to 6 hour experience. And then, you have sort of like your farewell where we all sit around the circle and talk about, the experiences. And then you drive back. I drove back to LA with the people that I went out there with. But the minute I got home, I put my head up against my little son. He's 1 year old, touch my head to his, and it was like so much weird stuff just evaporated. Now here's the postscript of the story, make of it what you will. Around 11:30 at night, when I was going through the absolute shit and wildly screaming and losing my mind and having to embody him while she was me and throwing all that shade at me and negativity.
This is while you were in the actual ayahuasca experience.
In the ayahuasca experience, embodying my son and having to deal with all the negative stuff that I had thrown at him since he was born. Basically go through each moment. It could be subtle, Ryan. It could just be like, I wish you'd stop fucking crying, just like that. But what's radiating out of your body when you say stuff like that to a tiny baby, which is just this porous vessel for energy. Right when that was happening, Ashley told me Seneca was inconsolable crying, for a good 30 minutes.
So you guys are connected in some way.
I feel like that, yeah. Because he's never done that. He's not really that kid, certainly not at that time. I mean, it's just too many spooky things like that. And again, you make of them what you will, but it certainly affected me in a way that I'm like, I'm a fucking believer. So the first year after that, I felt very, very much like I knew what my role was. I knew what I needed to fix. And then at the tail end of last year, I'm finishing my master's degree. And then I get COVID, so I can't walk.
How bad was your COVID?
It wasn't bad, but I just couldn't be with the other people that I'd, grinded for 2 years with. I couldn't do the walking ceremony, which is just largely symbolic. I didn't want to do it anyway, but then everyone convinced me to do it. And so I was like, fine, I'm going to do it. And then I get COVID and can't do it. My parents closed on their house, and that was an 8-month search. Put in 9 offers all over town. It was really grueling. And I just didn't know. I was like, I don't know what's next. I don't like anything anymore. I just feel bad, and I'm eating well, and I'm in decent shape, and I have a great family. I have so many great things, and yet none of it feels like enough of anything. I'm not interested in anything. So I recall hearing from Rob Dyrdek. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not familiar with Rob, no.
He was a professional skateboarder and then was designing shoes for DC. And the story goes that he was telling on a podcast, I believe it's Lewis Howes. He was saying, when I was 25, I was basically told that my best years were behind me and I was going to get another 2-year contract with DC, and then they were going to cut me off and say goodbye. And so he decided to change his life then and there. He was smoking a bunch of weed, partying a lot, didn't really know what was next. And that snapped him out of it, and he decided to go get hypnotized. So he looked in the Yellow Pages, at the time, the Yellow Pages, the phone book.
Back in the day, baby.
Exactly. Before the internet. He found this guy, this hypnotist named Dr. George Pratt, and got himself hypnotized for success. And now he runs 19 different companies or something, and he's on his way to becoming a billionaire. And it's been this this process, and he attributes a lot of his success to this hypnotist.
And what did the hypnotist unlock? Did he talk about that? Like, what was like, because we all hold ourselves back. Like, we all self-sabotage our own lives in multiple ways, right? By the people we keep around us, by our ambitions, by whatever. Like, sometimes it can all be too much, but it usually has to deal with us. So, like, I'm curious what this hypnotist helped him get out of his own way.
Well, I can't speak for Rob, but I looked the guy up and found him. He's in La Jolla, and, it was expensive. And so I was like, I found him like 2 years ago when I was thinking about this, maybe a year ago, because I felt kind of the early startings, the twinges of this a year ago. Looked into him, had a conversation. You get a 5-minute consultation. 5.
Mm.
It's like, so what are you wearing? No, he didn't say that. And I felt like, I don't know, I wasn't convinced. And I don't know, I have a very cartoonish, prior to this, I had a very cartoonish understanding of hypnosis, the little watch from Warner Brothers cartoons.
Yeah. So I would still feel it's the same.
Yeah, but there's actually quite a bit of, neuroscience behind it. So definitely dive into that with your guest or your future guests, and psychology in general. But I go down to see him, I pull the trigger on it, and he's like, I'm not going to hypnotize you the first day, because in order to hypnotize you, we basically need to clear your subconscious, all the trash that is probably holding you back.
So it's a multi-day experience.
Yes. I'm sure that it would be, you could make it different. Like, I guess if you've done a bunch of self-work in that regard, most people, I think, haven't, in a really nuanced way. Everybody knows about mantras and saying every day in every way I'm getting better and better and this kind of thing. But whatever you say that's nice and sounds good really will not have the effect over time without fixing the things in your subconscious that are, problematic. At least that's how I understand it. That's what he wrote a book about it called The Code to Joy.
Yeah. Talk is talk. You have to fucking do the work, right? Like,
right.
You have to make actual changes.
Well,
you can't just talk about the shit.
Well, but still, that's why, like, talk therapy seems to be temporary relief. But when does talk therapy end?
This is talk therapy.
Well, but I'm saying, like, with a therapist on a couch, like, you don't really have an end date, right? It's like, keep coming until you
feel better, which is never.
Right.
Yeah. It's just it's a business that creates a lifetime client, and who doesn't want a lifetime subscription?
Sure. And I don't want to denigrate it, because there's a lot of interesting healing benefits there. But his point is, you could talk all you want, and you'll feel better. But until we deal with some of the things that are going on at the subconscious level, you will be trapped, which is scary. So I don't really want to give away in this interview. I'll tell you off camera what I really think is going on.
Sure.
But that first session was as life-changing as the ayahuasca, but in a very positive direction. I will say there's some energy work involved, which is not necessarily in large print on his website, because he comes from a Western practical background. I think he was the chairman of Scripps psychology department for a long time, like, very high-level academic, respected psychologist. But what was really effective was the energetic stuff. And you really have to identify the things that are holding you back. And that, it's so funny. He says, usually when someone says, it's probably a little thing, but there was this one time, that's when they're about to unload some shit on you that plagues them every day, and whether they know it or not. And for me, it was a lot of that. And I think I said, like, being the middle child and feeling somehow invisible in spite of trying to achieve all these things. It almost always comes back to our parents,
It does, yeah. And for you to be a parent as well, like, that's closing that full circle.
Oh, it was huge, because I just, like, I don't ever want to be in a position where, my kids are like, if you just would have paid attention to my facility for this thing and could have encouraged it, and, like, just said one good thing about one thing. Again, children are born these incredible balls of light, and every day they get slapped down by the world, and it just dims it and blemishes it a little bit more. And I guess that's kind of the stuff that had been plaguing me my whole life, is like, and for most people, wherever you
think for everyone,
yeah, and identifying those things. And then he has this very specific exercise in his book, Code to Joy, whereby you put them in a vessel and then send them away, whether that's dropping them into the ocean or setting them on the shoreline and watching them go away. It's a very specific set of steps. I recommend everyone do it. And the worst that can happen is it doesn't work for you. But for me, after that session, following the steps, it worked like a charm. And since then, there's just been an incredible lightness in my day-to-day that was worth the price of admission. You know what I mean? But then I went back and got hypnotized. And, I think it's fairly basic, but the idea is you listen to it over and over on a daily basis and just grind that in that, you're going to be successful for XYZ reason, and it's tailored to you. And right after that, I had like one of the most prominent auditions, didn't book it, that I'd ever had in 10 years.
Yeah.
Like the fucking next day, dude. And of course Ashley's like, you think that's what Dr. Pratt did? I was like, I don't know, but it doesn't matter.
The stars aligned somehow, right?
It doesn't, exactly. Yeah. And so I told my sister about all this. It's like, look, I went to see this, hypnotherapist, and it was really powerful. And all she wanted to do was, like, I don't want to say punch holes in it, but like come at it from a very practical, logical standpoint. It's like, well, what about this? And couldn't he have just been doing because, one of the tests is neuromuscular feedback. And she's like, couldn't he have been pushing less lightly on your arm? And if you think that the entire thing is based on him being a charlatan, it's either a super elaborate ruse or, he actually is that good. And I get zero benefit out of doubting it in any way, right? I show up, the walls are covered with social proof. There he is with this celebrity. There he is with this high-level celebrity. There he is with that one. And you're like, okay, so people know him and come to him. I'm already paying good money for it, so I got skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the placebo effect, I fucking want it to work.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I spend a single moment thinking, I wonder if this is real? It does not benefit me. So I just jumped in, and I've been feeling fantastic since.
Well, you look fantastic.
Thank you.
That's incredible. So this was just a few months ago.
No, man, this is a couple weeks ago.
Oh, really? You're fresh off of it.
Yeah. And so a little bit more detail. So I get this incredible audition opportunity, and it's for like a movie that's shooting in Romania for a month. And I'm like, so prime. Like the guy's a scientist, but he's also a guitar player and a polymath, and he's got 2 kids. And I was like, oh, it's mine to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked really hard on the audition and rehearsing for it.
Is it Ridley Scott?
No, that would have been. No, it's an independent film.
Okay.
But it was the lead, the lead male. And I went back to George and said, and at one point he's like, what do you want most in the world? And I was like, I want to fucking book this role. I should have been like, I don't know, next week's lottery numbers or whatever. Because, he's powerful. And he did say, he's like, I don't know if it's, I don't know if this is the one, but it's coming. And so you hear that from a complete outsider, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds good.
Yeah.
And it amps you up.
Well, having someone in your corner is huge,
Yes.
right? And the problem is in this town and in our Western society that we built for ourselves, like people put other people down so they can step on them and get higher, right? And have someone in your corner is huge. And you don't get that a lot in the entertainment industry. You don't get a lot of people like pulling for you and, wishing you luck and shit like that, because everyone is just trying to survive. It's really nasty.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. But it was, he did that. I was laying there and, we're doing the hypnosis and I'm recording it. And I'm really starting to get there, Ryan. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling incredible. Then his dog just uncontrolled. And I was like, come on, George, like fucking put that dog away.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Or at least get a soundproof room.
Yeah, no. But so there was that little mishap, but so that happened. I didn't book it, and I was and I wasn't really attached to it like I had been in the past. I wasn't as devastated, although it really did seem like the stars were aligning. Like, and then 2 days ago, another huge audition from a completely different standpoint, like on the commercial side, something that has never come across my area before, and the callbacks are today. So clearly I didn't get it.
Okay.
But where's all this coming from? And then the partnerships that we've been building on the corporate side for elemental wellness. It's like, what I really wanted to recapture was the way that I felt in 2012 when I moved to LA, which was, I can do anything. I can do anything. And I've proved it over and over. I can do anything, but I also need to be excited about it to make it sustainable.
That's the real key, isn't it? Like you can try anything, but if you don't love it, it's just a 2-year, gap.
Certainly for me.
Yeah. I feel the same way too. Like I tried to get involved in a few other things during COVID and stuff like that. But nothing made sense to me the way, storytelling does. And none of them brought even close to the amount of happiness that I get from making, great stories and sharing them. Like,
how do you continue to get better at storytelling? Do you have a mentor? Do you just consume a lot of media? Like, how do you focus on trying to get better?
I think for me, it was, I loved Anthony Bourdain. So to me, he was the most authentic, real personality that ever existed. And he just also happened to be on TV, and write books. But to me, he was never someone who like shied away from the nastiest parts of who he was.
Until he stopped smoking. That's pretty lame.
Agreed. But, he said what he wanted to say. He ripped apart, the cooking industry and the restaurateur industry in no reservation, or in, what was it called? The Chef's, what was his first book?
Kitchen Confidential.
Kitchen Confidential, yeah. And then of course, No Reservations on Travel Channel, and then eventually his CNN series, oh my God, what was the CNN series?
That's when I stopped watching it. I watched a lot of the first one though.
Yeah.
When he was in Vietnam, that's where I learned about bún chả and those beautiful pork meatballs that are cooked in lemongrass, and they fan the smoky smell across the street, which hits people's nostrils, and they're like, I gotta get some of that.
Exactly. But I just felt like he traveled with a certain authenticity. He treated people with respect, wasn't afraid to disagree with people, was always willing to listen to other points of view. It didn't seem to compromise, on his art or his storytelling. I don't know necessarily all the details behind the scenes of how these shows came to be, or what his roles were in producing or writing and things like that. I think he wrote most of his own stuff, but it's just always seemed to me like, you just keep doing your own thing, and eventually, it'll come around. And I've hit a bit of a speed bump in the last few years because of COVID, and not being able to actually travel freely was a huge problem in 2020, 2021, and a little bit of 2022. And I just feel like, when he wrote Kitchen Confidential, he was 46 or 47 years old when it became a New York Times bestseller.
Holy shit, that's our age.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I just think to myself, like, holy shit, I've already made like 50 hours worth of television before Bourdain even made his own book, before he even started making TV. So when people are like, oh, are you fucking done? Are you retired or whatever? I'm like, no, like I'm just having a little bit of an intermission. Like I'm going to gear it up again because the best years are ahead of me. Like I have at Bourdain at right? Like Bourdain at 46 didn't have half the resume I have, but what he did from 46 to 63 when he took his own life, sadly, was spectacular. And the desires behind that, the way he carried himself, the way he was uncompromisingly himself, and authentic, I think is spectacular. And I just always wanted to try to do that, but in an adventure and travel space, because I like climbing mountains, like being out in the world. I love food, but not to that extent, and I can't talk about it, and it wouldn't make me happy to do something like that. Like you have to gravitate towards what makes you happy. And then when you're doing it, people see it in your eyes, and then they feel connected to you because you're experiencing something that you truly love.
Right.
And you can't fake that.
Yeah. How about, have you reached out to the sort of heavy hitters in the travel space, like the Rick Steves and who are like the dominant personalities in your space? And are you familiar with them? Are you friendly with them?
Yeah, I mean, so like they're all on YouTube now. Like they are. Like they're no one. No, I mean, no one's really making like travel.
Like, is Bear Grylls on just YouTube, or is he?
No, I mean, Bear Grylls has his own fucking world. I mean, he's taking Will Ferrell out into the mountains to climb. You know, he has his Running Wild with Bear Grylls, which is like on NBC, and he takes celebrities out into the wild and like does a night with them, makes them eat a rabbit or something like that. You know, it's quite fun actually. I really do like. I like Bear. Like he's a caricature of himself for sure, but it works, and you know he does it pretty authentically. Like, but he also has like some competition shows, like reality TV shows on Amazon Prime, I think.
Oh wow! So he's got an empire.
Yeah, full empire.
Yeah.
But most of the others are YouTubers in various ways, shapes, and forms. And yeah, I've chatted with a few of them, trying to get them on the podcast, talk about their work and life and stuff like that. But you know, these are people that kind of started with YouTube when they were in their 20s or even earlier. And it's strange for me to have done everything I've done already in the traditional broadcast space, and then now coming into YouTube as a storytelling platform. Like it's kind of like almost like doing everything in reverse. It feels like.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, you know, when you've done like 50 hours worth of TV shows on BBC Earth and Discovery Channel and all this other shit, like, you know, why are you coming back to YouTube? But actually YouTube is where all the eyeballs are, and YouTube is actually where you can have the most influence. You know, more people watch Mr. Beast's videos on YouTube than watch BBC globally, which is crazy because
that's wild.
That is, right? So, yeah, so just trying to find the balance of that and just trying to make sure that I can still find a way to make it, to just pay the bills from that.
So you mentioned Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
But what is like the number one Ryan Pyle dream excursion or extreme trek that you haven't done yet?
So that's going to be the topic of my first documentary film, which is going to be shot in August this year, which is I want to go to Bhutan and do what's called the Snowman trek, which is the toughest trek in the world.
Oh shit. How much training do you need to do for that?
None. I mean, if you can walk.
What do you mean none?
Yeah, none. It's just, you just, look, if you
How hard can it be then?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. So it's just about endurance. It's mental. Like if you can walk on a treadmill for an hour, you can walk in the mountains for 10 hours. You just have to know what to do when you start to feel altitude sickness, when you start to get dehydrated. You know, like how do you avoid an anxiety break, you know, or something like that, where you start to hyperventilate because you can't control your breathing and stuff like that. So like if you have some experience at altitude and you know what to look for, or the problems that are going to start to hit you, you can kind of go anywhere and do anything. And then after that, it's just like, can I do this for 7 days? Can I do this for 28 days, which is what the Snowman trek is. So it's 28 days of 10 hours a day with 9 passes over like 18,000 feet.
That sounds grueling.
It will be. There was a documentary about it, about the Snowman trek a couple of years ago, where they took some ultra marathon runners and they turned it into like a race, but the runners like couldn't do it at altitude, and they were totally ill prepared clothing wise, and it snowed on them, and one had to get helicoptered out from altitude sickness, and like it was a total mess. It was kind of it was an entertaining documentary because of how unprepared they were.
Right.
But actually their lives were massively at risk because of how unprepared they were. And I really want to go in prepared and actually make a story about the people who live along that trail and why that journey is so important and why it's kind of been something that people want to do and achieve. And it has more to do than just being the toughest trek in the world. It is it's very much a spiritual journey as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, if you decide to do something in a climate that's a little bit more suited to shorts, I'm in.
Shorts, okay.
Yeah.
We'll find something where you can wear shorts.
Shorts and flip-flops, preferably. And margarita.
Margaritas in the evening. Yeah. No, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't had a drink since January 1st. And I will say that the number one thing, and this is the longest it's ever been since I was like 19, just to see what would happen. Because I love alcohol. I love the way it makes me feel. I love the ritual. I love the community. I love the denizens of, alcoholic places of consumption like bars, restaurants, etc. But not having a drink, first week, all I did was complain about not having a drink. And then after that, I was like, man, I'm sleeping better. I do feel a little bit better. My skin feels younger. There are benefits.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anyone should do it, but, and I'll definitely be back. But like, it's been an interesting experiment. And especially, again, speaking of dads here, life's hard enough, like having kids. So maybe if you tried that experience too, that experiment where you just cut it out for a minute, you might find some benefit.
Yeah.
You know?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like you've had so many careers and you've tried so many things, and now I feel like you're also applying that curiosity and that interest to things that are around self-help and, you know, finding motivation and just living like a better version of yourself, right? And I think, like, it's funny, you know, you did so many different things over 20 years, and, you know, from being a musician to modeling and doing all these things, and now it almost feels like you're turning all of that and all those experiences inward on, like, how to be a better dad, how to be a better husband, how to be a better friend or a better actor, a better collaborator, right? Like, instead of searching for a monetary exit, you know, it's almost like you're taking all that curiosity and all those experiences and, like, turning it inward. It's interesting.
Thank you for saying that. And I hope that, you know, the channel becomes, I plan to have a segment called Dad Vice. And I want to get the perspective on, well, from a lot of people, but not on whatever they're known for. So if you're a world-class chef, I don't give a fuck about that. I want to know how hard it is for you to be a dad, and what you've learned from that process, because I think that's where you really see the character in somebody and what they value. Is not necessarily what they're a master of. Hard to be a master of dadness.
It's hard to be a master of anything where other people are involved, no matter what their ages are.
Yes,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, like being a master husband. Like, how the fuck does that work? You know, like, or being a master son.
I don't know.
No, it's a lot of questions, but no, I'm loving it. I mean, from 2013 to today, what a journey. What a journey.
I can't wait to see what you do next, and I hope I can somehow, you know, be a part of it, or at least sing your praises, you know, because I think you need a little bit more of that. Like, more people need to know about what you do, and I know you already have probably hundreds of thousands of followers, but, like, it should be millions, man. Like, you inspire people, and we just need to get that word out a little bit more.
We'll work on it. Once I get a few things going.
Who's your publicist?
Once I get a few things going, we'll definitely come back and do this again. What do you think?
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely interested in some of the psychedelic stuff that you've done as well. I think that's very interesting.
I can point you in the right direction, but only you can decide to take that next step.
Yeah, it's a terrifying next step, it sounds like.
I do want to say a caveat. My story is pretty scary, but yours doesn't have to be. Yours could be as gentle as, you know, you can imagine.
I probably have a lot of skeletons in my closet. I'm sure they'll all come out.
Well, we all do, but whatever you're going to get is exactly what you need.
That's the terrifying thing.
You're like, I don't want to know.
I don't want to know. I want to
keep the lid on that jar.
Yeah, because once it's open, it's fucking open, right? And like it, I mean, like your experience of being kind of affected every evening for a year based on the experience you had is, that's a lot to want to accept in your life.
You see those eyes watching you, and you know that they're always there, even if you can't see them.
Jesus Christ. All right, buddy. Should we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we go to the split screen. Shake it out. Great to see you, buddy.
Great to see you.
Thank you, boss.
Thank you.
And we fade to black.